era of football. Est video is purement para intratnamiento y no infringe derechos de autor. Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 776. I should be the one to stand up. Fanzing's attack was quite timely. You know, Fanzing rarely attacks. After all, he is tall and old. He is not used to sharp attacks. He is more used to guarding the goal to save the ball, relying on his height and long arms to better block the angle of the opponent's shot. So for the Overlord team, although he is not the best goalkeeper, he is a very reliable goalkeeper. For that current classical football game, a reliable goalkeeper is often enough. However, he guarded the opponent's first 3 shots, but he couldn't save them once. He stretched his arms as much as possible and made saves in time, but he was always a little short. This made Fanzing begin to feel that if he continued to guard the goal, then the opponent could score a goal with one shot. As an experienced goalkeeper, Fanzing has felt that if he does not change his style under such circumstances, he may not be able to make an effective save in this game. The opponent's attack is always played deeper, and it is always longer to judge from the outside to the penalty area. In this case, if he can attack accurately, it is very likely to block the opponent's attack in advance. Of course, if the attack is wrong, it will be easier for the opponent to score, but as long as it succeeds once, isn't it a success? So Fanzing quickly chose to attack, and he succeeded, intercepting the ball beautifully in the middle. After throwing the ball far away, Fanzing breathed a sigh of relief. This time the attack was effective, and it also made Fanzing feel that his thoughts and judgments were not wrong. Next, when defending, he should pay more attention to the number of attacks. The ball thrown by Fanzing flew directly to Zheng Qi's feet in the middle. Zheng Qi took the ball and turned around. Roth immediately rushed over. Although it seemed to have no effect, Roth still did not change, but continued to guard Zheng Qi. This is his characteristic. Zheng Qi curled his lips, shook his feet quickly, pretended to pass the ball, but pulled the ball back, and then planned to break through by force. His fake moves were very realistic, but they did not play any role because Roth did not intend to block Zheng Qi's pass. What he wanted to block was Zheng Qi's taking the ball in the next attack. So when Zheng Qi broke through, he reacted immediately and quickly blocked Zheng Qi's route. Zheng Qi made an emergency stop, then raised his foot and passed the ball, and then he accelerated forward. The one who received the ball was Zheng Qi, who retreated. After he took the ball, he began to move forward. At this time, Zheng Qi ran forward and made a gesture to receive the ball. Roth followed Zheng Qi closely, ready to speed up and steal the ball at any time. After all, it is not difficult to steal the ball at such a close distance. I'm going to make an emergency stop, pay attention, Zheng Qi shouted in the team channel, and then he made an emergency stop. In the sprint, Roth was involuntarily thrown away for a distance. Zheng Qi immediately passed the ball to him. Zheng Qi retreated to receive the ball and then dribbled forward. Roth still blocked his way forward, but Zheng Qi didn't care anymore. He was already in the 30-meter area. There were many ways to attack next. After another emergency stop with the ball, Zheng Qi dodged the gap for passing the ball, raised his foot, passed the ball to a place a little further back, and then accelerated himself and sprinted into the penalty area. Yinbu, who had the ball, made a long pass and passed the ball into the penalty area. The pass was quite high. Schwarzenbeck knew that even if he jumped early, he couldn't get the ball down. He could only rely on the strength of the confrontation and the protection of the landing point. Yinbu's long pass was not very close to the goal, while Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan had already rushed into the penalty area at the same time. At this position, there was no need to worry about the opponent's goalkeeper attacking, it was too far from the goal. The ball began to fall, and Lu Xiaoshan appeared first at the landing point of the ball. Schwarzenbeck struggled to compete with him for the position, but Lu Xiaoshan still grabbed the first landing point and quickly passed the ball down. Zheng Qi received the ball at his feet, and Roth struggled to interfere behind him. Beckenbauer in front had also moved over. Zheng Qi dribbled forward, and Beckenbauer did not hesitate and quickly moved sideways to stop Zheng Qi together with Roth. The two of them joined forces, and basically no one could continue to move forward, but just when Beckenbauer was about to pounce, he found that Zheng Qi's feet moved again and passed the ball out. Lu Xiaoshan, who had just landed, received a pass from Zheng Qi. With just a turn, he was able to break through Schwarzenbeck and then shoot. Couldn't save his shot from this position no matter how fast he reacted. Previously, Beckenbauer's interception was able to intercept the ball when the shot just started. At this time, if Beckenbauer couldn't intercept, Lucian's chance of scoring a goal was more than 80%. Frustrated, Beckenbauer could only turn around and rush over again. Lucian passed the ball again. Another diagonal pass back, the ball accurately fell in front of Lucian, who was advancing. No matter how much Roth interfered behind him, he couldn't shake Zheng Qi's center of gravity. Ken took a risk and fell to the ground to block all of Zheng Qi's ground shots. Unfortunately, Zheng Qi kicked a beautiful lob. The ball flew over Ken's head and quickly flew into Bayern's goal. 4-3, the Overlord team finally took the lead. The Chinese fans in the stands collectively gave a huge shout, and the famous players in the Chinese region nodded and praised. This attack was so wonderful. The cooperation between Yuan Thong and Lu Xiaoshan, it was so fast. It's hard to deal with just one person, let alone two people. Beckenbauer did nothing wrong. He did his best. Unfortunately, he still couldn't stop the attack of the Overlord team. This team is too terrible, and the cooperation between these two people is also too terrible. At least I can't figure out how to deal with their attack. They can constantly launch secondary attacks, and they can also rely on the cooperation of two people to increase the success rate. You can't fight against these guys at all. Hu Chuo sighed and said, I thought about it for a long time, and I can only think of playing against them and controlling the ball more at my feet, but the facts have proved that this trick is useless to them. Before finding a player who can deal with these two guys, it will be difficult to deal with this team. Yuo Jie also expressed it in the same way. After all, this game is the quarterfinals of the World Cup. A match that represents the highest level. The cooperation between these two guys makes people feel helpless, and the level displayed in this way is really terrifying. For such a team, both Hu Chuo and Yuo Jie feel that they're somewhat helpless. They can't do anything, and Beckenbauer can't do anything either. After all, Hu Chuo and Yuo Jie are the core players of the top teams in China. In terms of status and level, even if they're a little worse than Beckenbauer, they are definitely limited. This is an open conspiracy, a display of overwhelming strength. In such a situation, let alone Bayern's lack of preparation before, even if they are prepared, they may not be able to resist. Keep attacking, be careful when the cross is made, just attack the goalkeeper, understand? Also, the attack in the middle must be combined. Only when the side and the middle are combined, the attack will appear more threatening, understand? Beckenbauer said in the team channel. It is undoubtedly a rare thing to be able to remain calm at this time. For Beckenbauer, his calmness at this moment is the key for Bayern to remain calm and continue to play. Beckenbauer believed that as long as his teammates could keep a calm state of mind, they would be able to make a breakthrough in offensive in the next game. Of course, offensive alone was not enough to win the game. He would have to invest more in defense. Thinking of this, Beckenbauer began to observe thoughtfully. At this moment, Lu Xiaoshan and Zheng Qi had already participated in the defense. These two top players began to completely burst out with their own level, showing extremely high levels on both offensive and defense. Schwarzenbeck and Roth are actually guarding the two of them. Even if they're really good, they will always be of some use. The key lies in the next replacement. It is impossible for me to fill two positions alone. However, since the two attackers of the opponent are concentrated in the middle, it is not impossible. As long as we can block them once or twice, it will be a little bit of advantage. Isn't the victory of the game accumulated by these little bits of advantages? Thinking of this, Beckenbauer made up his mind. Although this is destined to be a very difficult thing, as the captain and core of Bayern, and inheriting the great title of the Emperor of Football, Beckenbauer felt that he must take up such a task. Bayern, as the greatest team in the history of German football, naturally has many great players. To be able to grab such a title, Bayern's players are undoubtedly measuring themselves with those great players. Even if they're embarrassed, they cannot let those great titles they inherited be embarrassed. In such an emotion, Bayern's attack has quickly achieved brilliant results. After a series of passes, Mathis got the ball in front of the penalty area. His long shot attracted Zheng Qi's attention, then he passed the ball to Effenberg, who followed up. Effenberg quickly made a straight pass. Muller's running position attracted the attention of two central defenders of the Overlord team, but the ball flew to Rummenigge's feet. Rummenigge quickly fell to the ground and shot, and hit the ball into the dead corner of the goal. While Fanzing was still thinking about whether to attack or not, the opponent had already scored first. Next, defend against their attack. Beckenbauer shouted in the team channel. Chapter 777 sees the opportunity. Their morale is very high, and they seem to be unaffected. They are indeed Bayern. Lu Xiaoshan sighed in the team channel. It's nothing great, they just didn't lose their spirits. We didn't expect to beat them in a bad state and win, did we? Zheng Qi laughed and replied. That's right, let's go and take the lead again. Lu Xiaoshan said. Listening to the two people talking as if no one was around, the players of the Overlord team have already adapted to it, but a sense of heroism still rose in their hearts. In the midst of laughter and chat, the masts and doors were reduced to ashes. Such a style has always been admired and yearned for by any Chinese, and now the style shown by Lu Xiaoshan and Zheng Qi is a bit like that. Launch an attack. Although the main attackers of this game are still Lu Xiaoshan and Zheng Qi, their containment is also very effective. Without their containment, Bayern's defenders will rush forward, and even if the two of them are excellent, I'm afraid they will not be able to get a chance to score. Of course, if one of them was left free, Lu Xiaoshan or Zheng Qi would definitely pass the ball out. It was for this reason that their containment was so effective. So no matter from what angle, their containments helped Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan very effectively, there is no doubt about it. Maybe some people who don't understand think that they are just clinging to their thighs, and the whole team's progress is achieved by the performance of Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan, but deep down, they have a clear conscience and will not have any shame, because in the game, they have shown their best side. After the restart, Zheng Qi began to continue to dribble forward. He rarely passes the ball now, because Roth's pressing made him realize that if he easily passes the ball, it will be difficult to receive the ball again, so he needs to do more things himself. Breakthrough, disrupt the opponent's defender, then pass the ball to teammates, and then go to the penalty area to grab points. He will participate in every link of the offense, which is of course a very stressful thing, but he will not feel tired because of it. Because he was used to doing everything, it was like this when he was extraordinary, and it was also like this when he was Overlord. Facing Zheng Qi's dribbling breakthrough, Bayern was also very vigilant. After all, Zheng Qi had already started to do this before. However, they could not send too many people to defend Zheng Qi. Leaving others empty was also tantamount to suicide. So Enmola, who was facing him head-on, was easily shaken off by Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi still faced Roth. Roth was defending Zheng Qi tenaciously. Compared with defenser is always passive, especially now, because the physical fitness of both sides is similar. In this case, many places that the top defensive players could use in the past do not exist, so this is also the reason why their current classical football goals are far more than before. Now in such an environment and physical fitness, it is too friendly to offensive players and too unfriendly to defensive players. In fact, this is also the biggest reason why the Italian team cannot enter the seeded team in Europe. You must know that in the era of classical football, judging from the results, among the European teams, Italy is at the same level as Germany. Others, whether it is Britain, France, or Spain, are far behind them, let alone Russia. Although classical football was interrupted for a period of time, the subsequent development of each country almost started from scratch, and the large population base was advantageous. This can be seen from the fact that the strongest teams in Asia are China and India. However, in fact, the past football foundation is still very important. Although the Indian team occupies the position of the seeded team, they have relatively won the least number of World Cup championships. China is only slightly better than India. The countries that have won the most World Cup championships are still Germany and Brazil. Then the United States relied on the advantages of traditional football foundation and numerical advantage to squeeze into the top 3, which is also a great thing. In this case, Italy failed to squeeze into the top 3 in Europe. It must be said that they are better at defense, which makes them suffer more than other teams. Under Roth's hard pressing, Zheng Qi still controlled the ball with ease, and then kept moving forward. When he moved forward, the two midfielders Mathis and Ekvenberg did not dare to stay too far away, which made the defense in other positions begin to become empty. It was not until he entered the 30-meter area with the ball and felt stronger pressure that Zheng Qi chose to pass the ball. After a feint of breakthrough, he passed the ball and then began to move forward. Here it comes. Beckenbauer immediately tensed his nerves and prepared to deal with the next defender. He began to observe all the situations in the front court. It was Yingbu who got the ball. He began to move forward with the ball. At this time, he was likely to pass the ball directly to the front of the penalty area. He did not pass it directly, but split it to the side. Uziki received the ball. His cross had a large arc and fast speed, which was suitable for grabbing the point. It was passed out. Front point. Beckenbauer shouted at Schwarzenbeck, who rushed to the front point without saying a word and followed Lu Xiaoshan. At this time, Beckenbauer noticed that Zheng Qi first made an emergency stop, luring Roth to stop as well, and then quickly accelerated again and sprinted into the penalty area. Chen Fengxiao is going to pass it to him to shoot. Beckenbauer's mind clearly showed such a picture. then he immediately rushed over. The next moment, Lu Xiaoshan jumped up from the front point, overpowered Schwarzbeck, and threw the ball to the middle. When Lu Xiaoshan headed the ball over, Zheng Qi had already rushed over. He would not waste any time. As long as there was a little gap, he could directly volley the ball into the goal. He had always done this before. In less than a second of gap, he could seize the opportunity and make a shot that was enough to break through the top goalkeeper's gate. After all, no matter how good the replacement was, it was impossible to block this time. If it was not for prediction, no one could not give the opponent any space, but this time, Beckenbauer seemed to have done it. He moved his feet quickly, and then came in front of Zheng Qi, and was very close to Zheng Qi, completely blocking Zheng Qi's shooting route. When Beckenbauer's body appeared in front of Zheng Qi was indeed surprised. He did not expect Beckenbauer to come so quickly this time, but this did not make people panic. Quickly changing the way he touched the ball, Zheng Qi lightly dunked the ball downwards, causing it to hit the grass and fly forward diagonally, just past Beckenbauer. Beckenbauer, who had pounced with all his strength, had no room to react and could only watch the ball fly past him. The timely judgment and the short-term pounce had left Beckenbauer no room at all. His body was in a short period of stiffness at this moment. Although it was an extremely short period of time, it was enough for him to not be able to react again. Zheng Qi went around from the other side of his body, then caught up with the ball, without stopping it at all, and shot directly. Ken danced and pounced, but still failed to catch the ball, and the ball went directly into the net from under his armpit. After Zheng Qi scored, he turned his head to look at Beckenbauer, and then ran away. Beckenbauer clenched his fists, and then slowly let go. Although it didn't succeed, it still caused some obstacles. Although he will be prepared next, such a defender can also attract their attention. Beckenbauer thought silently in his heart. He will never give up easily. Although he just completed such a defender with so much effort, he still didn't succeed. However, the consequences of trying hard and not trying seem the same, but in fact they are completely different. His defender just now undoubtedly caused a good effect. Although Zheng Qi still scored a goal, his fifth goal of the game, it still made Zheng Qi's offensive extremely difficult. Zheng Qi scored this time, can he score next time? For any offenser, the more obstacles it causes, the greater the possibility of mistakes in the offenser, which is a very normal thing. For anything to develop, the more obstacles it encounters, the greater the possibility of failure, which is also a truth. For defender, there is no reason to be able to defend successfully. Only by working hard can you succeed more times than the opponent's defender. Before, the Overlord team took the advantage through a defender, and Beckenbauer now has to work hard to make up for such a gap. Keep attacking, defender, leave it to me. Beckenbauer said in the team channel. His meaning was very clear. On offenser, everyone worked together, and on defenser, everyone was responsible for their own positions, and the most important task was left to him to complete. He was the most trustworthy player in the team and the strongest player. Of course, he would shoulder such an important task without any hesitation. And others also trusted him. No problem, the offenser is left to us. We will definitely seize the opportunity to score goals every time. Isn't it just the ability to seize opportunities? We also have advantages in the midfield when we attack. After all, we have many points to launch attacks. In terms of creating opportunities, we also have a huge advantage. Mathis said in the team channel. His words resonated with the Bayern players. Indeed, whether it was the two midfielders Mathis and Geffenberg, the two fullbacks Lum and Brickner, or even the two forwards Hoeneß and Rummenigge, they all had the ability to organize. Each of them could launch an attack and then create good opportunities. This is the characteristic of Bayern. They don't have a core midfielder, but they can create countless opportunities, and then Muller can grasp these opportunities. The ability to seize opportunities. They also have enough confidence. CSS Gushanda Western Novela on un canal distinta al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subiran sinisfuet sot invitamus cordialmente visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 778. It is not only necessary to seize the offensive opportunities, but also that defensive opportunities. This is what Beckenbauer thinks. He can't help with the offensive opportunities for the time being, because his position cannot be too forward, even if he is actually very good at attacking. After all, the attack of the Overlord team may appear at any time, and he needs to keep a hand to maintain his state. However, The level of Bayern's other offensive players is enough to make Beckenbauer feel at ease. They are all excellent players. Even if Zheng Qi and Lucian will also participate in the defense, they will not be affected too much. Bayern's players began to pass the ball continuously. Although this kind of passing is not what they are best at, they also have this way of attacking. With the personal ability of their players, whether it is passing or breaking through, they can effectively control the ball under their feet. Lem, who was making an assist, received a cross pass from Effenberg, and then he started to break forward. After being intercepted by the opponent, Lem made an emergency stop and passed the ball to Mathis, who came up to receive the ball. Mathis still controlled the ball under Zheng Qi's pressure, but he had no other passing route and could only choose to pass the ball back to Lem. After Lem received the ball, he made a big pass. Breitner, who was making an advance on the other side, received the ball and dribbled it horizontally, and was about to dribble the ball into the penalty area. Zheng came up to intercept him, and there was no problem with the Overlord team's defender. Breitner passed the ball directly to the front of the penalty area. Rummenigge, who was retreating, took the ball. Breitner, who passed the ball, continued to sprint forward. Rummenigge made a beautiful return pass. Before Zheng finished the defense, Breitner shot directly in the air without stopping the ball. At this position where the angle was not very correct, Breitner shot a wonderful spinning ball. The ball quickly flew into the sky, flew over the head of Jabu, who was filling in the position, and then fell rapidly. Fanzing stretched out his arms, but he couldn't touch the ball. The ball flew past his hand and then went into the far corner of the goal. A beautiful goal. Bayern equalized the score again. The goal rate of both sides is really too high. So far, both sides have seized 10 of the 11 offensive opportunities. Of course, they didn't play a particularly fast break. They were quite patient in each attack, which led to such a high goal rate. The goal rate of the Overlord team is even more amazing. Yuan Thong, who didn't score a goal in the previous game, has scored all 5 goals. Will this midfielder get a good taste of scoring in this game? Zheng Qi laughed as the commentator shouted. He not only wants to get a good taste of scoring, but also use this to win this important game. He was a little surprised by Beckenbauer's performance just now, but Beckenbauer has to pay attention to himself and Lucian. How long can he last? It's not that Zheng Qi is too arrogant, but he knows that no matter how good Beckenbauer is, it is difficult to resist the forced attack of the 2 players of the Overlord team. Under the pressure of the overall attack of the Overlord team, they can squeeze out one person to assist in defense, which is already the limit. However, one person can only assist in one person. Facing the attack of 2 players of the Overlord team, no matter how good Beckenbauer is, he can't resist it. As long as you pay attention, there will be no problem. Fortunately, we have trained strong enough in the previous games, others can attract the attention of the opponent well, otherwise, this game may be really troublesome. Zheng Qi thought to himself. In so many games before, the growth of other players of the Overlord team under pressure finally began to have enough effect at this moment. Under such a big threat from Zheng Qi and Lucian, Bayern did not dare to relax the defense of other Overlord team players, which was enough to prove that the threat they created before was enough for Bayern to understand. If they relax their defense against them, they will definitely be severely punished. It is precisely because other players also have great threats that Zheng Qi and Lucian can fully display their level in a relatively weak environment. After the kickoff, Zheng Qi once again launched a personal breakthrough. Under the involvement of others, he quickly broke through to the opponent's half. Roth immediately fouled when Zheng Qi just crossed the half. Want to use fouls to interrupt my rhythm? This is a good idea. Zheng Qi got up from the ground, patted the non-existent dust, and thought to himself. In today's classical football, there are not many fouls, because when the opponent's confrontation ability and center of gravity are very stable, once the foul action is big, it is easy to get a card. If the foul action is not big, it will not have much effect. If you foul when you see that the opponent's center of gravity is unstable, why not just steal the ball? In fact, most of the fouls are fouls caused by the failure of stealing the ball in such a situation. Of course, Roth's foul this time was obviously intentional. Under intentional circumstances, it is extremely rare for a defensive player to stop the progress of a top player by committing a foul that will not get a card. Roth is such a defensive player. When he followed Zheng Qi but it was useless, he resolutely chose to foul. On the surface, such a foul is meaningless. After all, even if you foul, the opponent can quickly restart the ball, get the ball again and launch an attack. Your foul only delays the opponent's attack. However, in fact, the rhythm of the offensive player was indeed interrupted. This is something that cannot be described but really exists. After Zheng Qi passed the ball, he was not in a hurry to get the ball, but commanded his teammates in the team channel, asking them to fall back and then launch an attack. Zheng Qi wanted to find his rhythm by running. After a minute, Zheng Qi decisively retreated, and then asked for the ball. After receiving the return pass from his teammates, he started to break through again. Roth came up again, and when Zheng Qi forced a breakthrough, he decisively chose to foul again. It was still just a foul, no yellow card. Zheng Qi climbed up, then looked at Roth and smiled. "Well done, that's it." Beckenbauer praised in the team channel. Although such a foul tactic failed to steal the ball, in fact, the Overlord team was quite dangerous in the previous pass. As the old saying goes, the more complicated the offensive is, the more likely it is to make mistakes. An idea began to gradually take shape in Beckenbauer's mind, but now it was still in the game, and Beckenbauer had nothing else to say. He could only continue to concentrate on playing the first half of the game. After the restart, the Overlord team started to pass the ball again in the middle and front court. Zheng Qi did not wait too long this time. He began to take the initiative to run towards the player who received the ball, then quickly took the ball and organized the attack himself. In the case of being far away from the opponent's defense line, Zheng Qi took the ball from behind without any pressure. No matter how closely Roth watched, it was impossible for him to have no chance to get the ball. After getting the ball 3 times in a row, Zheng Qi got the ball again and made a passing move again. The next moment, he dunked the ball back and broke through by force. Zheng Qi did this series of actions as fast as lightning. Although Roth was prepared, he still couldn't react immediately, because Zheng Qi might pass the ball or break through. As long as the speed is fast enough, no one can react immediately. When Zheng Qi broke through Roth had time to turn around and pin Zheng Qi with his body. After temporarily blocking his advance, Roth quickly stepped down, wanting to successfully steal the ball. At least he had to foul to keep Zheng Qi. However, Zheng Qi seemed to have thought of this a long time ago. He flicked the ball to the side, just avoiding Roth's outstretched foot, and then quickly jumped over Roth's foot, and accelerated after landing. Roth didn't dare to foul now. The foul just now was not serious. Even if it was a continuous foul, he would not get a card. It was just that in the calculation of the system, the proportion of his irregular actions was increased, and the same action might be used continuously and get a yellow card. But before getting a yellow card, such actions can be said to be safe. Fouling is also a skill. This skill was mastered by many people in the past classical football games, especially those famous defensive players. Choosing the right foul action at the right time is undoubtedly a profound knowledge. However, when classical football is rebuilt in the current game, few people will do such calculations of foul skills. After all, fouls seem to have no meaning in many cases. However, top defensive players like Roth still calculate, because in many cases, fouls are indeed a very effective way of defense, even if such effects have begun to be discounted in the current game. In Roth's calculations, he can still foul now, but fouling Zheng Qi from behind will at least get a yellow card, and the possibility of a yellow card is very small. The great possibility is that he will get a red card and then leave the field. Roth is not afraid of fouling, but the consequences of getting a red card are something he cannot bear. In the current game, missing one person is really a catastrophic consequence. Unlike the past games, it is possible to rely on overall performance and counterattacks to create opportunities for victory. In the current classical football, if one person is missing, it is basically impossible to win. Because no matter how serious the foul is, it will only get him off the field, not the opponent. So he just turned around quickly and chased after Zheng Qi from behind. This kind of pursuit may not have much effect, but it can keep the pressure on Zheng Qi, at least reducing his offensive options. However, when Zheng Qi dribbled the ball for a distance, before Roth could catch up and the defensive players in front could not intercept him, he resolutely took a long shot while running. Spinning ball. The ball was like a rainbow in the air, and the end of the rainbow was Bayern's goal. Chapter 779. Focus. The atmosphere in the locker room was very solemn. When Zheng Qi's excellent spinning ball flew into Bayern's goal, there were only more than 2 minutes left in the first half. This time is not long, but it is not short either. There are too many examples of launching attacks and scoring goals within 1 minute. However, not every attack can score a goal in a short time. Although both sides scored many goals in this game, each attack took a long time. The Overlord team's previous attacks took 1 or 2 minutes to form a shot. The reason why there are so many goals now is not because the game is fast-paced, but because both sides are very patient in attack. This is actually the key factor that makes Bayern somewhat passive. The previous offensive of the Overlord team has always been fast-paced, and they scored goals through a large number of attacks, especially the second attack. Bayern's preparations were also aimed at this. Whether it was Roth's defense against Zheng Qi or Schwarzenberg's defense against Luciauschen, they were all prepared to block the Overlord team's second attack. As a result, the Overlord team changed their offensive methods and began to pursue efficiency more. The speed of their game did not decrease. They were still constantly passing the ball to launch attacks, but they began to pursue the success rate every time they shot. This was not a big change for the Overlord team, but for Bayern's defense, it was too passive. In such a confrontation, although Bayern was not at a disadvantage, they also unconsciously began to pursue the success rate of each attack. The attack that pursued the success rate, of course, could not be hastily ended, and the offensive had to be well organized. In this way, the remaining time was not much. When they organized the attack and went to the front court, the Overlord team launched a fierce pressing. In such a short time, they could have increased their running to interfere with Bayern's attack. In normal games, such running defense is nothing more than delaying time, but in this case, the delayed time is enough for the Overlord team to successfully lead into the second half. Leading into the second half is already a very important thing for the Overlord team. After all, it is their turn to kick off in the second half. In the competition of success rate, such an advantage is very important. In the pressing of the Overlord team, Bayern's offensive was also a little difficult. Of course, they could pass back and wear down the opponent's spirit before attacking, but if they did so, there would be a big problem. There was not enough time. Time is very important, everyone knows it, especially now that the game time is 1 minute away from the end of the first half. 1 minute more will not work. So Bayern's players can only bite the bullet and attack. The so-called meeting difficulties head-on is also, in many cases, they can only meet difficulties head-on. The running of the Overlord team interfered with their attack to a great extent, but the individual level of Bayern players was still very good. When they found that the pass was a little difficult, they began to choose individual breakthroughs to launch the attack. Breitner broke through Yuzuki's defense on the wing, and when Xiang Zhuan came to fill in the position, he raised his foot and passed the ball to the middle of the penalty area. Rummenigge, who was advancing, took the ball. When he wanted to move forward, Zheng Qi filled in time and blocked him. Seeing that he was almost intercepted by Zheng Qi, Rummenigge could only turn around quickly to protect the ball, and then pass the ball out. Mathis, who followed up, immediately volleyed the ball as it rolled over. He didn't want to play so hastily, but now there were less than 20 seconds left before the end of the game. If he didn't shoot at this time, it would be a little delayed. Maybe the ball would fly into the goal after the time was up. It would not count at the time, which would be really pitfall. Such pitfalls were not uncommon before. So even if the timing was not very good, he chose a long shot. He was confident that the spinning ball from this position could score a goal. As long as the defender did not intercept it in the middle, he could score the ball into the opponent's goal. However, Mathis's hope was shattered. As soon as the ball flew out, Yingbu, who flew over from the side, blocked the route of the shot with his body. The ball hit his stomach hard and flew out diagonally, and was controlled by Zheng Qi, who was returning to defense, steal him. Roth rushed up to Effenberg's shout, but Zheng Qi turned around and controlled the ball. There were only 10 seconds left before the end of the game, and it was difficult to launch an attack at this time, but as long as he controlled the ball and prevented the opponent from taking the ball and attacking again, it would be easy. Roth and Effenberg's simultaneous pressing did not cause Zheng Qi to make mistakes. It was not until the whistle sounded at the end of the first half that Roth and Effenberg stopped pressing in frustration. The first half of the game is over. 6-5, the Overlord team is leading by 1 goal. This is not surprising, but all 6 goals of the Overlord team were scored by Yuanzhong. The fact that no one else scored even 1 goal is enough to make people feel surprised. He completed a hat-trick in the first 15 minutes of the first half, and in the subsequent offensive and defense, he also grasped all the offensive opportunities. Yuanzhong is really amazing. Scoring 6 goals in the first half, such a scoring rate is really terrible. The new team of the Overlord team always brings surprises to people. As a Chinese commentator, I know that Yuanzhong showed excellent goal-scoring ability in last year's game. It is obvious that he has been preserving his strength and hiding his goal-scoring ability in this year's game. Using it at this time has an amazing effect. Now the Overlord team is in a great advantage, and they need to maintain this advantage in the second half. The Chinese commentator said excitedly that they had been looking forward to Zheng Qi's explosion for a long time. In fact, all the famous players in the Chinese region had been looking forward to this scene for a long time. Because they were professional enough, they could understand Zheng Qi's performance last year, which was impossible for foreign opponents to understand. As players in the Chinese region, they certainly would not reveal it. To be honest, it would be useless to reveal it. Even if the other party believed it, it would only distract them more in the game. Zheng Qi was able to lead the Overlord team to win continuously while preserving his strength. This was the most critical factor for his hiding his strength to be effective. Conspiracy is not terrible, but open conspiracy is terrible. The practice of preserving one's shooting ability for a long time is itself an open conspiracy. If the other party is not clear, it can have a good effect. Even if the other party is clear, he has nothing to be afraid of. After all, in the game, his performance can distract the other party. Of course, under the current situation, Zheng Qi's reserved strength has not been leaked. Although it has brought some trouble to the performance of the Overlord team before, it has reaped rich fruits at this time. We can't take the second half of the game lightly. We took advantage of many things in the first half, but we only led by 2 goals. Yes, in my opinion, the opponent kicked off in the first half, and we were still ahead by 1 goal, which basically means we were ahead by 2 goals. Ha 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 ha. But in the second half, we have to score after the kickoff to truly prove that we already have the advantage of 2 goals. Zheng Qi's words made the players of the Overlord team laugh. It was true. Now the Overlord team almost got a 2-goal advantage, but the real advantage was only 1. In such a short time, they can't come up with any effective way to deal with our offensive. The only thing they can do is to add more trouble to our offensive and make us more disturbed when we attack. In this way, we are prone to mistakes when we attack. Once a mistake occurs, our advantage may disappear. This is their only way to deal with it. Zheng Qi said. This is a very effective way to deal with it. After thinking about it, the Overlord sighed sincerely. It is very effective, but it is not the most targeted tactic. After all, they are dealing with us in this way because they expect us to make mistakes, rather than them taking the initiative to do something. The difference between the two is huge. In the former, the initiative is in our hands, and in the latter, the initiative is in their hands. Now the initiative is in our hands. What we have to do is to minimize mistakes. When attacking, we have to do this. Zheng Qi began to explain in detail what to do when attacking in the second half. It was nothing more than the things that had been done in the first half. Be more serious when controlling the ball, don't be distracted, run more actively, and receive more from Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi will also receive more from them, so that their offensive will have a higher success rate. This is the kingly way. The players of the Overlord team nodded one after another. They were used to playing like this. When receiving the ball and running, they did not relax their attention at all. Of course, doing this is a very tiring thing. No player can do this continuously. However, the players of the Overlord team can take a good rest during the intervals between games, and then greet the next attack in a better state. Relatively speaking, they tend to be more distracted when defending. In fact, this is a problem that many teams are used to. They prefer to attack rather than defend. World-class teams like Bayer do not have such problems. Teams like Shuhan, Dongguan, Kaohsiung, etc. do not have such problems either. However, the Overlord team is a new team after all. They will not lose their concentration when attacking, but when defending, there will always be some small problems. However, Zheng Qi does not care about this, and the other players of the Overlord team do not care either. As long as the offensive is played well, they will have no problem. As for defense, occasionally a few outstanding overall performances are enough. After all, defense also depends on the number of successful defenses. The most important thing for us now is to seize the opportunity to attack. Zheng Qi thought to himself. Chapter 780. All the same, for Bayern's players, the result of the first half made them a little disappointed. Although they were not desperate, if there was no good solution, their fighting spirit would be difficult to be as strong as usual. This is also human nature. However, Beckenbauer obviously showed his value. During the halftime break, he made a detailed arrangement and told all the players to add more pressure to the Overlord team when defending, set up more obstacles, and let their chances of scoring continue to decrease. In this way, they can gradually reverse the situation and seize the chance of winning. After hearing this, Bayern's players felt relieved. Although they also realized that this was to force the opponent to make mistakes instead of taking the initiative, it was already very good to come up with a decent plan in such a short time. So Bayern's players nodded one after another. Now there is only this way. Try hard in the second half to force the opponent to make mistakes. At the same time, don't be affected by anything when attacking, but try to play your own characteristics, seize the opportunity every time you attack, and don't have any problems. That's it. This approach may not necessarily allow them to win, but it can allow them to move closer to victory. Many games are like this. Only by trying to move closer to the right place and working hard can they seize the opportunity to win. Bayern's current position in Germany is not obtained casually. They are the team that has participated in the World Cup the most times in Germany, and they are the well-deserved overlord. At the same time, they are also that team with the best performance in the World Cup. How can the players in such a team give up their fighting spirit because of some disadvantages? Seeing that the players' fighting spirit has been restored, Beckenbauer secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He also knew that the ideas he came up with could only be regarded as somewhat useful, not to the point of being very useful. It also requires the players' unity and collective efforts. Now the fighting spirit shown by others is very good. In the second half, Bayern still has a chance to fight. If they can pass the Overlord team, Bayern's next game will probably be much easier. After all, the Overlord team is the only team that Bayern is not familiar with among these strong teams, and it is also the only team that will suffer such a big loss in tactical arrangements. If they can still win under such a disadvantage, can other teams stop Bayern's progress? No. With this thought, Bayern's players came on the field aggressively. They were not professional players, but they had a more enthusiastic attitude and fighting spirit. If it were not so, they would not have endured the lonely training and hard exercise to reach the current level. In the absence of a professional league, what else can they have to do to achieve such a level besides love? However, it must be said that except for a very small number of players who really love classical football and gave up the professional games of the football era to enter the world of classical football, most of the other players who play classical football, especially those who are very good, are because they can't go further in the professional games of the football era, so they have to settle for the second best and come to the world of classical football. With such a strong professional league, such a consequence will occur, which is also helpless. Zheng Qi and Lucian are undoubtedly the most talented among the professional players. Compared with these good players in classical football, they have a great advantage in talent, and their basics are not worse than the other side, so they have such a crushing performance. It's not that no one doubted their identities, but the classical football game was originally a very open game. Anyone can participate, even if they are professional players. There is no violation. After all, they play one game after another. On the field, the identity of the players is the most meaningless thing. Only the performance on the field is the biggest factor in whether you can move forward. Even if they are professional players, they don't rely on their professional status to bully others. At most they have a little advantage in attribute points. When the players of both sides came out, the Chinese and German fans in the stand cheered loudly. Although Germany's population is far less than that of China, it is also one of the largest countries in Europe, and the popularity of classical football in Germany is also very widespread, so they are not at a disadvantage in the stands. In addition to their own country, they also have many fans in other countries. The Overlord team has a little advantage now. Bayern is actually very dangerous. Many people in the stand thought so in their hearts. If Bayern is eliminated, then we may be able to take advantage, said a young man with curly hair in the stands. Stop it, the team that can beat Bayern is more difficult to deal with, okay? A thin young man next to him answered. The curly-haired young man chuckled and said nothing more. To be honest, the attack of the Overlord team is really hard to control. In the past, there was only Chen Fengxiao, and there was always a way to deal with it. Now there is another one. No wonder even Beckenbauer can't deal with them. The thin young man sighed. If you can't deal with it, then you can't deal with it. Just strengthen the offensive. The Overlord team's tactics have always been to work hard on offensive. Why do we have to focus on their offensive instead of strengthening our own offensive? Even if we explode, we seize every offensive opportunity and they don't make mistakes, it will only be a draw. Why should we have no confidence in our offensive from the beginning? The curly-haired young man answered. He should not be unaware of this truth, but he wants to better control the situation on the field. The thin young man answered. So, these Europeans always think too much. Relying on instinct and heart to play is enough. The curly-haired young man answered. How many people can be like you, Diego? The thin young man laughed. The curly-haired young man did not answer, but looked at the field. Those two guys are such players. Zheng Qi and Lucian, who were evaluated by him, were launching a full-scale offensive on the field. After a back pass in the back court, the ball was passed to Zheng Qi's feet, and Zheng Qi began to dribble forward. He played completely different games in this game than in the previous games. He chose to break through more. The thin young man said. The right choice. If he passes the ball to Organize, then the time he has the ball will be greatly reduced. For a player like him, the less he has the ball, the less threat he will have. The curly-haired young man replied. Same as you? The thin young man smiled. Same as me and you. The curly-haired young man also smiled and replied. Roth was still struggling to interfere with Zheng Qi, and on Zheng Qi's route, Ethenberg and Mathis were also on standby. Of course, they would not give up their own targets to deal with Zheng Qi, but they would distract some of their attention. Zheng Qi said a few words in the team channel. Yingbu and Jibu, who were originally behind him, began to speed up and rushed past him, then quickly separated to the two sides and ran towards the side. Ethenberg and Mathis were both a little embarrassed. If these two people went to the side, if they were still in the middle, then the Overlord team would have an absolute advantage on the side. Although Briegner and Blum were both offensive and defensive players, they would be easily dragged by the opponent 1 against 2. If he didn't go and continued in the middle, Zheng Qi would definitely pass the ball and then attack from both sides. He went to the penalty area to grab the point. Keep guarding the middle. Beckenbauer shouted in the team channel. Ethenberg and Mathis, who were originally a little hesitant, immediately defended the middle and didn't go to the side again. Seeing that he was about to run into the 3 opposing midfielders, Zheng Qi continued to dribble that ball forward. When Ethenberg and Mathis came up at the same time, he raised his foot and passed the ball sideways while running. Yingbu ran to receive the ball, and saw him coming to defend him. He quickly raised his foot and passed the ball to Yuzuki, who was on the side. Yuzuki ran with the ball while observing the movement in the penalty area. It was rare for a cross to get such space. After running to the most comfortable position, Yuzuki raised his foot and kicked the ball into the penalty area with force. The huge arc and fast speed, this cross was as usual. Facing such a cross, Bayern's defenders began to run and observe continuously, intending to cut off the ball in advance in the middle. Beckenbauer was also observing. This was a very difficult thing, because he not only had to observe Lucian's running, but also Zheng Qi's running, and the arc and landing point of the ball. Observing so many things in such a short time may not be effective. Of course, it is a laborious and thankless task, but Beckenbauer still did it. When there are no easy things to do, difficult things, of course, need to be done with effort. Even if it only adds a little trouble to Zheng Qi's attack, it will take 100 times the strength to do it in the game. The hope of victory is fought out bit by bit in this way. Even if it cannot succeed temporarily, it will not make Beckenbauer discouraged. Zheng Qi rushed into the penalty area and then jumped high. Beckenbauer was a little stunned, because he judged that Zheng Qi's takeoff seemed a little early. Such a jump would not have the opportunity to touch the ball. Could it be that he was covering for Lucian? It is really possible. Just when Beckenbauer was thinking this way, Zheng Qi's stagnation time in the air was a little longer than he expected. Beckenbauer's face changed. The next moment, Zheng Qi, who had been suspended in the air for a little longer, met the flying ball with all his strength and headed it. The next moment, the ball hit the grass, then flew upwards quickly, flew over Kun's outstretched hand, and dived into the goal. Chapter 781. Continuous experimentation. Oops, when seeing Zheng Qi head into the 7th goal of the game, Beckenbauer's heart immediately skipped a beat, and he began to realize that he had made some mistakes in his judgment. Zheng Qi actually had a trick up his sleeve, which was to keep his attribute points. Before when he jumped, Zheng Qi's jumping and air-staying abilities were not so outstanding. This can only prove one thing, that is, Zheng Qi's attributes are still above his calculations. This is terrible. After all, if you want to assist in defense like this, you need to have a special understanding and calculation of the opponent's attributes, otherwise, it is absolutely impossible to form an interception in time and create trouble for the opponent. Should I concentrate on defending Yun's Thong? Then Chen Fengxiao will have more room, Beckenbauer thought to himself. However, he did not delay things while thinking, but waved his hand, allowing Bayern's players to quickly launch a counter-attack. I am still constantly testing the best way to defend. The better your offensive is, the greater the possibility that I can test it out. Beckenbauer said in the team channel. Bayern's players nodded silently. They understood this principle. The opponent's endless new changes would naturally cause their defender to suffer a great loss. In this case, if their offensive could keep up and not be thrown too far away by the opponent, then they would still have a chance to move forward. Now it was 7-5, 2 goals behind, but it was not a desperate situation. As long as the next attack could open up the situation and take it slowly, there would always be a chance. With this idea in mind, Bayern launched an attack. Their offensive level would not drop at all. In front of the defensor of the Overlord team, their offensive could still have a good effect. After continuous passes, Muller ran to the back point to attract the attention of the Overlord team's backline. Effenberg, who had the ball, picked the ball and passed it to the other side of the penalty area where the defensor was weak. Hoeneß, who was advancing, fell to the ground and shot, scoring Bayern's 6th goal. Keep an eye on the others. Don't move. Don't let Yuan Thong have many passing routes. Beckenbauer shouted in the team channel, this is another way of thinking. It is certainly difficult to defend when Zheng Qi breaks through, but he always has to pass the ball. If he has no passing route, then he can only continue to dribble forward. At the time, Roth will interfere with him and there will be his own interception in front. Without a passing route, what can Zheng Qi do? He can only force a breakthrough, right? Although his breakthrough ability is quite good, it is still very risky to do so. Under Beckenbauer's command, Bayern's players immediately began to run frantically, staring at the offensive players of the Overlord team one by one, especially in the midfield. Whether it is the 2 fullbacks who make forward assists, or in Baojubu in the midfield, plus the 3 forwards, they are surrounded by Bayern players defending, and even for this reason, they have reduced the defensive forces at the front of the penalty area. Zheng Qi dribbled the ball forward. Although there seemed to be a clear path ahead of him, Beckenbauer was guarding at the front of the penalty area. By guarding there, he could intercept Zheng Qi head-on and defend Luciachen from the side. If Zheng Qi passed the ball, he would assist Schwarz and begin defending Luciachen. If Zheng Qi continued to dribble that ball forward, he would meet him and form a double team with Roth interfering. With his mind racing, Beckenbauer felt that his idea should be correct. However, the next moment, he realized that he had overlooked something. When he had just entered the 30-meter area with the ball, that is, when Beckenbauer had not yet come up to him, Zheng Qi swung his right foot while running and kicked the ball out with force. It was another flawless spinning ball. The ball flew into the air and passed over Beckenbauer's head. It then dropped rapidly after entering the penalty area and flew past Kahn's outstretched hand. The 8th goal, Yuan Thong really scored all the goals for the Overlord team so far. He is an omnipotent shooter, whether it is scoring in the penalty area or shooting from outside the penalty area. It's really terrible. Such a shooter could not score a single goal in the 5 previous games in China and so many games in the World Cup. Bayern's passivity is understandable. They did not expect Yuan Thong to have such an ability, which made them suffering defensor. The commentator's side basically explains why the Overlord team can now occupy such a big advantage, or why Bayern is now at such a disadvantage. In terms of offensive, they did not suffer any loss, but in terms of defensive, they suffered too much loss. In fact, their offensive level has been very good so far. If they had not seized almost every offensive opportunity, they would not have fallen behind by only 2 goals. The Bayern players did not lose heart, but launched the attack more cautiously. They knew that they could not afford mistakes now. The fewer mistakes they made, the more goals they scored, and the more opportunities Beckenbauer could try. They were actually just 1 attack away. As long as Beckenbauer could succeed once, they could turn the situation around. As their captain and core, Beckenbauer had never let them down, and today, he would not let them down again. This was what the Bayern players were thinking at the moment. This was a heavy trust under pressure. Of course, they all knew that their captain and core could bear such pressure. In the next attack, they spent a full 4 minutes to find an opportunity through continuous passes. Rummenigge received a direct pass from Mathis and broke through. He passed the ball back near the baseline. Muller followed up and headed for the goal immediately, scoring his 4th goal of the game, helping Bayern to reduce the deficit to 1 goal again. Although he scored his 21st goal in this World Cup, Muller still didn't feel very happy. Even if such a result was enough to compete for the World Cup top scorer in previous years, it was still far away, wasn't it? Judging from the current situation, it would be very difficult for Bayern to advance. If he couldn't advance and couldn't play the rest of the games, even if he won the top scorer, it would be meaningless, not to mention that he and Luciachen were still 9 goals apart. Keep marking people, mark the other players. Beckenbauer continued to shout in the team channel. Now the most troublesome thing about defending the Overlord team's attack is that you can't recover the defensor. If you recover the defensor, then there will be too few defensive forces outside the core defensor area. In the case of Zheng Qi's excellent long-range shooting ability, this approach is undoubtedly tantamount to suicide. If the defensor area is expanded, others will not be able to help fill in the position in time, and can only rely on Beckenbauer's replacement to deal with Luciachen or Zheng Qi. This is the reason why Beckenbauer has been repeatedly defeated in Defensa. If the opponent had one but not two outstanding players, Beckenbauer would have been able to stop the attack of the Overlord team. If the opponent did not have both excellent ability to grab points in the penalty area and strong ability to score long shots outside the penalty area, they would not be in such a passive position in Defensa. If you think about it carefully, you will understand how depressing the situation Beckenbauer is facing now. Defensa is nothing more than zone defensa and man-to-man defensa. The biggest pressure of the Overlord team's previous offensive came from the second attack. In order to reduce the number of the opponent's second attacks, they could not shrink their defense and adopt man-to-man tactics to make Zheng Qi's second chance to get the ball less. This was Bayern's basic defensive method before the game started. However, Zheng Qi's sudden change in the offensive method made Bayern's defensive method all in vain. The Overlord team's rhythm was still very fast, but each attack began to hit the success rate. Zheng Qi did not participate in the second attack, but added a point in the penalty area, which directly made Bayern only passive defensa. Whether it was zone defensa or man-to-man defensa, it seemed to be useless. You should know that offensa can rely on talent and inspiration, while defensa must rely on training and strict organization, as well as good pre-match preparation. Now Bayern's pre-match preparation is all in vain. The temporary organization is of course full of loopholes, and more can only rely on Beckenbauer's improvisation. Although Beckenbauer is a top player, and can even be said to represent the highest level of classical football now, under such a disadvantage, he still seems to be unable to do anything. So now Beckenbauer is facing an embarrassing situation. Although with Bayern's overall level, the instructions he issued will basically have a good effect, whether it can be effective or not, can only be tried step by step. Bayern's players once again launched a man-to-man defensa. Zheng Qi dribbled the ball and broke through, rushing straight to the front of the penalty area. Beckenbauer quickly came up this time. He had to block Zheng Qi's advance earlier, so that he would not be able to easily complete the spin shot. The two consecutive spin shots have proved that the interference behind Roth alone cannot make him make a mistake in his spin shot. Only frontal interception and interference can prevent Zheng Qi from threatening Bayern's goal with long shots. When Beckenbauer rushed up, Zheng Qi did not rush to pass the ball. He did not pass the ball until he was about to approach the 30-meter area and Beckenbauer was about to approach him. Then he raised his foot and passed the ball diagonally to the front of the penalty area. After passing the ball, Zheng Qi did not stop at all and rushed past Beckenbauer. Beckenbauer turned around, but he was rushing forward before. Now he had to stop and turn around. Of course, he could not compare with Zheng Qi who was sprinting all the time. So he was left behind by Zheng Qi, and Lu Xiaoshen, who received the ball at the front of the penalty area, directly pushed the ball sideways. Zheng Qi, who was advancing, took advantage of the situation to pass the ball forward and rushed into the penalty area, then kicked the ball while running, and fell to the ground again. Chapter 782. Treacherous. Cutting off the passing route is not okay. Even if you can cut off the passing route of others, you can't cut off the connection between Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshen. Focusing on Zheng Qi is not okay. If one person plays, he can't keep an eye on him. If two people play, the others will be free. Lu Xiaoshen's assist just now was very beautiful, which is enough to prove that this guy's condition is not a problem at all. He hasn't scored a goal in this game so far, but he just gave the chance to score to Zheng Qi, who has a better chance. What should you do in the face of such a team? It's really too difficult. Beckenbauer has always been very confident in his defensive thinking. However, at this moment, he can't help but lose some confidence. He started to take a detour and got into a dead end, but it's no wonder. The pit dug by this Chinese team is too big. The curly-haired young man in the stands couldn't help but sigh. What a pity, I still want to beat them in the game, but now it seems that there is no chance. I can only find a way to beat the Overlord team. Don't they have a chance? There is still half an hour in the second half. The thin young man couldn't help but ask. No chance. Beckenbauer has gone to extremes. He is only thinking about how to defend the attack of the Overlord team. Unfortunately, this is basically impossible. The Overlord team's attack has already taken too much advantage. If their attack is affected next, they will have no chance at all. The curly-haired young man replied. Really? But with Bayern's level, they shouldn't be so flustered. The thin young man still didn't quite believe it. I regard them as the biggest opponent. Before, I thought they were the biggest opponent. That's right, but now the biggest opponent has been defeated, so the opponent who defeated them has become our biggest opponent. At the time, I will let them know whose attack is the best. The curly-haired young man stood up. Let's go, there's nothing to watch in this game. You are too stubborn, stop making trouble. Keep watching, there is still half an hour. Why are you leaving now? Are you going to prepare for the game against Russia? I have been preparing for a long time, why don't you watch more in this game? The thin young man pulled him to sit down again. Some distance away from them, two darker black youths looked at the two men from a distance and shook their heads at the same time. That guy is pretending to be unique again. The Overlord team is now in a great advantage, and Yuan's Thong's full level has been thoroughly demonstrated. But there is no need to leave early. That guy likes to show his so-called personality too much, just like his inexplicable predecessor. Who made him inherit such a title? Didn't you also inherit the same great title? You have to do something that fits the setting of that great player. That's right, you know him very well. I have played against them so many times, of course I know a little bit, but I didn't expect Bayern to encounter such a dilemma. Fortunately, Bayern met the Overlord team first, otherwise, no matter which of us met the Overlord team under such circumstances, we would suffer a great loss. Yes, we're really lucky. When the players of other strong teams in the stands began to sigh, Bayern's offensive also began to encounter some troubles. The Overlords did not change much in defense, or they had already reached their limit before, and it was difficult to strengthen it. The defensive strength did not increase, but Bayern's offensive troubles increased. The reason was simple, because their offensive began to have some problems. Bayern's players have played together for at least 3 or 4 years. The youngest player in the team, Lam, is 22 years old, and the oldest player, Kun, is 26 years old. Becken Dao, 25 years old, is their captain and core, and has played with them for a long time. Such a stable lineup has made Bayern's performance in recent years quite good, and it can be expected that they can maintain a high level of performance for at least 4 or 5 years, and even create a dynasty of their own. However, it is precisely because of this that it is difficult for them to improve their level after reaching a certain peak. At the same time, because they are too familiar with each other, even if Beckenbauer hesitated a little just now, they all noticed that Beckenbauer really couldn't come up with any solution to the Overlord's offense now. Cut off the opponent's passing route, the opponent can still rely on their own personal breakthrough to score goals. Go up to defend, Zheng Qi can cooperate with Lu Xiaoshan. After there is space, the two of them will have no problem cooperating to deal with 3 defensive players. Don't go up. Did you see Zheng Qi's 2 spinning balls that hit the target? What other methods can be used to defend against such an attack? In this regard, Bayern's players did not think that Beckenbauer was useless, but they really couldn't think of any good way. However, it is precisely because of this that it is easier to make people feel desperate. So many means have been exhausted, and they can't stop the attack of the Overlord team. What should we do next? Such thoughts undoubtedly have a great impact on Bayern's offense. If they want to increase their success rate in offense, they need to organize more carefully, and patiently pass the ball back and forth, and cooperate with each other in passing and cutting. They are very familiar with such an attack. However, this kind of offensive tactic with high difficulty and good effect does not mean that you can succeed if you play it often. You have to pay a lot of energy and hard work every time. If the state is a little worse, it is a little worse, and there is no room for change at all. Bayern's attack was just a little short of the mark, so in the final effect, it was a matter of inches. Ethenberg's transfer speed was a little faster. Although Muller sped up to catch up with the ball, he was still forced to the bottom line by Ingu, who was returning to defense. When he turned around and passed the ball, Yuzuki quickly started and intercepted the ball halfway. Seeing that the opponent had intercepted the ball, Bayern's players began to press frantically in the front court, wanting to intercept the ball and relaunch the attack through such performance. They failed to return to defense in time, which made them swallow that bitter fruit. When Yuzuki got the ball, he passed it to Zheng Qi almost immediately. Zheng Qi got the ball, and Effenberg and Roth rushed up at the same time. Zheng Qi looked up at the front court, then swung his right foot, as if he was ready to immediately launch a long pass to launch a counter-attack. Such a move surprised Effenberg and Roth. After all, Lu Xiaoshan was still in the front court at this time, and a good long pass was enough for him to score a goal. However, the next moment, Zheng Qi deducted the ball, quickly pushed the ball between the two of them, and then accelerated his sprint. Effenberg and Roth were almost instantly shaken off by Zheng Qi. They pressed in the front court, and although there was a lot of space in the back court, at this time, the midfield was also very empty. Once Zheng Qi's speed exploded, you could only follow him and eat dust if you made a second reaction, although in the current game, there was no dust to eat. When Effenberg and Roth turned around, Zheng Qi had already left in the dust, caught up with the ball all the way, and quickly rushed through the center circle. Roth gritted his teeth and chased after him. Only a tenacious player like him could still maintain his fighting spirit at this time. At this time, the only ones who were still defending were Beckenbauer and Schwarzenbeck. The other attackers either lost their composure or pressed too hard in the front court and could not return to defense in time. Seeing Zheng Qi rushing towards him with the ball, Beckenbauer immediately began to retreat. At the same time, he began to command Schwarzenbeck to stare at Lucian in the team channel, and at the same time, he began to gradually retreat, trying to slow down Zheng Qi's forward speed. But Zheng Qi didn't slow down at all. He dribbled the ball to the sideline, and then began to accelerate. Now there was no one else in Bayern's backcourt. This way of dribbling the ball was a way to maximize his speed. Seeing Zheng Qi's reckless breakthrough, Beckenbauer was not in a hurry. He began to retreat in a straight line. No matter how fast you are still sprinting diagonally. I will retreat in a straight line. I can block your route to the goal anyway. Sure enough, after Zheng Qi caught up with the ball, Beckenbauer had retreated to the front of the penalty area. At this time, only Schwarzenbeck followed Lucian and ran there. Roth was still chasing behind Zheng Qi. Beckenbauer felt a little relieved. Now it was 3-2. Bayern suffered a little loss, but it was not irreparable. Come on, if you come, I will double-team you with Roth. Beckenbauer thought to himself. However, he soon began to wonder if he had overlooked something again. The next moment, he saw Zheng Qi swim his right foot, and at an angle that was not right, 30 meters away from the goal, he resolutely kicked a long shot. A spinning ball at this angle. Beckenbauer jumped over subconsciously, but he knew deep down that there was no chance. The speed of a spinning ball is always very fast. If it is not fast, the goalkeeper will not be able to react in time at such a distance. If he jumps over now, it will be useless, but he still jumped over, just for that little hope. That little hope did not become more hope. The ball flew over his head. Although he jumped hard, he still couldn't touch the ball. At this time, although Ken watched Zheng Qi shoot, he knew that it would be too late to save the ball after the ball flew out. He could only predict in advance. Spinning balls usually shoot at two corners, left or right, front point or back point. Ken chose to dive at the back post, which was a gamble considering the shooter's thinking. After all, it was easier to bypass the goalkeeper's first reaction at the back post. However, when he strode back and dived, he found that Zheng Qi's spinning ball was actually directly hit in the middle. When Ken fell to the ground, he just wanted to strangle Zheng Qi to death. How could this man be so treacherous? Chapter 783 Super Genius. Zheng Qi's third spinning ball in this game turned the Overlord team's lead into 3 goals. This was also the Overlord team's 10th goal in this game, and Zheng Qi's 10th goal. He never scored before, but when he did, it was a double-digit goal. Bayern had never lost a double-digit goal in a game in the World Cup, let alone been scored by a single player. Zheng Qi's outburst created 3 records, and he was considered a talent among talents. Why 3 records? Because in the previous World Cup games, in games of this level, such as the quarter-finals, no one could score 10 goals in a game. So Zheng Qi broke 3 records in one go. In front of his 10 goals, even Lucian's previous performance seemed a little bleak. Of course, everyone knew that Zheng Qi's ability to score 10 goals was closely related to Lucian's involvement. If Lucian hadn't always pinned down the best defensive centre-back on the opponent's back line, and at the same time kept Beckenbauer's attention on him, even if he went to assist Zheng Qi, he couldn't focus on it wholeheartedly. Zheng Qi's outburst is important, and Lucian's reputation is equally important. The two of them are always the most important players of the Overlord team. It's amazing, the boss is so awesome. Leader Rui in the stands couldn't help but get excited. There are still more than 20 minutes before the end of the game, but looking at the performance and momentum of the Overlord team, it is absolutely enough to gain enough advantages. It is almost impossible to lose this game next. Don't take it lightly. Zheng Qi didn't seem too happy in the team channel. Continue to play seriously, don't forget, 3 goals, if you really want to play, 1 in a minute, no problem at all. The players of the Overlord team nodded repeatedly. They didn't mean to relax at all, because they knew their weight, and they also knew that the opponents were the top teams in the world. If they were still relaxed against such opponents, wouldn't they be courting death? In any case, the players of the Overlord team are at least humble enough, and they won't have any other years because of the temporary good results. But now the advantage of the Overlord team is indeed very obvious. The curly-haired young man in the stands seemed to want to leave early again, but was stopped by his partner. The 2 black young men also shook their heads, thinking that Bayern really had no chance. The final suspense of this game was to see how many goals Zheng Qi could score. When a top player who has been patient for so long begins to show his level, what kind of level can he play and what kind of effect can he show? In other words, how outstanding is the strength of this top player? This is the most concerned issue for the core players of other strong teams. Lu Xiaoshan has proved that he is a super strong shooter before, and now, Zheng Qi has also begun to show his level, and even seems to be better than Lu Xiaoshan. In terms of shooting and scoring ability, Zheng Qi has shown a level that is not inferior to Lu Xiaoshan, and he can also organize the offensive. Adding the two together, Zheng Qi's importance to a team is simply beyond doubt. In the following game, although Bayern tried their best to fight the Overlord team to the end, they were still constantly blocked by the Overlord team through crazy running. Their offensive began to play more patiently, but it wasted more time. When they were still 3 goals behind, this approach was certainly not appropriate, but perhaps deep down in their hearts, they didn't want to give Zheng Qi any more chances to score. However, Zheng Qi had already scored 10 goals in the game. Even if they didn't score next, they wouldn't have any chance to save face. Thinking about this, it was really miserable. For the Overlord team, they could naturally defend patiently. After all, they were ahead enough. If they were not in a hurry when defending, they would have more room. The next 10 minutes seemed a bit dull. After Bayern finally scored 1 point, the ball returned to the Overlord team, and they began to control the ball with ease. Zheng Qi got the ball in the midfield, and Bayern did not press him more fiercely, but Roth blocked the position in front, so that Zheng Qi could not easily break through. Under such circumstances, Zheng Qi began to organize the offensive more through passing. He kept passing the ball, and then kept running to receive the ball. Through his passing, the Overlord team's offensive became smoother. Seeing this scene, Beckenbauer felt a little desperate in his heart. It was obvious that even if Bayern had prepared before, the Overlord team's offensive could also achieve sufficient efficiency and increase the success rate through Zheng Qi's passing and organization. After all, even if Bayern was prepared and had a better defense against Zheng Qi could also play his own level in organization and give other players more opportunities. In this game, Zheng Qi scored 10 goals in one breath, mainly because the opponent was not prepared in this regard and was completely unable to react to Zheng Qi's scoring methods, so a large number of goals were concentrated at his feet. If there was preparation, other players of the Overlord team would have more opportunities to score, and the effect at the time, maybe there would be no difference. This is the most helpless part. The Overlord team certainly played a little conspiracy, but even if such a conspiracy was seen through, it would not affect the overall situation. Just thinking of this, Beckenbauer felt that he did not lose unjustly. After continuous passing, the Overlord team scored the 11th goal of the game. When Zheng Qi was more closely guarded, other people did get a lot of opportunities. Lu Xiaoshan cleverly passed the ball to the other side. The Overlord who was advancing met the ball and pushed it. Ken made a wonderful save, but the ball flew right in front of Zheng Qi. Facing this gift from the sky, Zheng Qi would not let it go. With a light kick, he sent the ball into the goal of Bayern. 11 goals in a single game. Lu Xiaoshan's previous 10 goals in a single game was the record for single-game goals in the World Cup, and Zheng Qi broke the record created by Lu Xiaoshan in this game. You really are not soft at all. Lu Xiaoshan ran over to celebrate, and then sighed and said, "What's soft? Score as many as you can." "I'm only 19 goals away from you," Zheng Qi said with a smile. "What, you still want to catch up with my top scorer?" Lu Xiaoshan was shocked. "In the next game, if those guys still only guard you, I don't mind taking your top scorer position." Zheng Qi laughed. "I believe you, but if you really continue like this, I can help you as a supporting role. If you have the ability, you can break my goal record." Lu Xiaoshan waved his fist and said loudly, "Just wait and see." Zheng Qi laughed. Zheng Qi's goal was the last goal of the game. After all, in the past few minutes, the rhythm of the two sides' offensive obviously dropped, and a lot of time was wasted on the court. After Zheng Qi once again expanded the lead to 3 goals, Bayern knew that they had no hope. In the remaining few minutes, it was impossible to equalize. When facing such a team, even if they lost, Bayern felt convinced. Even if we were prepared before, it would be difficult to win this game, but we shouldn't lose so helplessly. Beckenbauer couldn't help but say when shaking hands with Zheng Qi. "Well, yes, but in that case, we will try to perform better in the game." Zheng Qi thought for a while and replied, "We can find ways to deal with a top shooter and effectively suppress his threat to a certain extent, but it is difficult for 2 top shooters to cooperate with each other." Beckenbauer sighed. "I shouldn't have focused on defensive from the beginning. Other teams should compete with us in offensive. You can observe carefully at the time to see if we will lose in the offensive confrontation." Zheng Qi smiled slightly and replied. Beckenbauer was stunned for a moment, then looked at Zheng Qi seriously, and then nodded. After listening to you, I'm looking forward to the time when that scene comes. Shaking Zheng Qi's hand vigorously, Beckenbauer turned and left. We have met one of the top 3 players in the World Cup, but he is not as powerful as we imagined. Lu Xiaoshen came behind Zheng Qi at some point and whispered. After all, we are not well prepared. But next, the opponents will be different. Maradona of Boca Juniors in Argentina, Pelé of Santos in Brazil, I don't know if we can meet each of them. Zheng Qi laughed. If Boca beats Dynamo Moscow, they will be our opponents in the semi-finals. Lu Xiaoshen replied. Then the other half, Chicago Bulls vs. Santos. Zheng Qi thought about it and asked. If nothing unexpected happens, it should be. Lu Xiaoshen replied. Then aren't we taking advantage? We can enter the finals by only beating one of the top 3. Zheng Qi laughed. What do you mean by taking advantage? Do you want to beat them all? Besides, there is no difference between the Argentine team with Maradona and the top 3. What is the concept of a player with the title of King of Football? Can you get the title of Maradona without a high level? Lu Xiaoshen replied. That's true. Maradona, a newcomer who has become a top player after 1 year of appearance, what kind of performance will he have? This can be considered a super genius, right? Zheng Qi asked. The super geniuses now are you and me. Lu Xiaoshen told a cold joke. Zheng Qi burst into laughter. Chapter 784. Composition of Boca Super Genius. This name doesn't sound very stylish. Shinryu Fei said thoughtfully. Yes, a newcomer can gain a foothold in a strong team, so he must be a genius. Zheng Qi also nodded. Different. Zheng Qi shook his head. How is it different? Is that Maradona so awesome? Shinryu Fei asked. How should I put it? Not everyone can use a name like Maradona. Although no one can stop someone from using such a name, if you don't have the strength to convince others, even if you call it such a name, it will only be a laughingstock. Zheng Qi thought for a while and said. In other words, unless you can convince everyone else, you can use such a name. Shinryu Fei asked. Yes, so this guy can use such a name this year, what else can he be but a super genius? There are many geniuses, but super geniuses are rare. In the past 100 years, in the Argentine team, there are no more than 5 players who can use the name Maradona. Zheng Qi said. So, he is really a super genius. Do you feel pressure? Zheng Qi asked Zheng Qi. What a joke, how can I feel pressured? I've observed the match with Bayern, Beckenbauer's level is indeed outstanding, but not to the point of being far superior to others. Maradona is probably the same. Zheng Qi laughed. That's fine, otherwise you won't win the World Cup and lose face for our fun. Shinryu Fei said. How dare you say such things? If you had played more football before, wouldn't you be awesome? Now you can help me better, so I don't have to go to Lu Xiaoshen. Zheng Qi laughed. Brother Fei has been training to play football recently, and I guess he can help you next year. Zheng Qi said. Shut up. Shinryu Fei blushed for a rare time. Hey, Brother Fei, did you lose the game before and learn from the pain? Zheng Qi was stunned, turned his head and looked at Shinryu Fei. Whether it's a game of football era or a game of classical football, I just don't want to lose. Shinryu Fei regained his composure and replied lightly. So that's the case, are you the only one? Zheng Qi asked. Quite a few people, Boss Liu was also training alone, of course I am training too. Zheng Qi counted on his fingers and said, there are also Zheng Hai, Niao, Li Rui and Wang Yuanfen are also training, but they seem to be playing around at most, not training very hard, and their main focus is on the club's training. That's normal, after all, we can't be distracted too much, but Fei Ji and Boss Liu are already so good, they can practice more classical football, or play in games, and they can also exercise in other aspects. Zheng Qi nodded, and then said to Shinryu Fei, I have a set training system and program, and I will send you a copy when the time comes. The specific situation is of course different, you can just make some adjustments yourself, but in general, my training content has been done very well. Shinryu Fei was stunned for a moment, and then nodded slowly. Of course, training plans are the most suitable for you, but in general, there are always many similarities. Giving them Zheng Qi's training content can at least prevent them from spending too much time on some basic things. If you guys can really practice, we can go to the World Cup together next year. Ha ha ha, it's more interesting to fight for honors with your brothers. Zheng Qi laughed happily. Shinryu Fei and Zheng Qi laughed at the same time. They are not very old, but they have been teammates for a long time since the ZY team. They are very familiar with each other. Even if they have never met each other before joining for fun, they have cooperated in the competition, which is enough for them to have a very subtle understanding of each other. Even Zheng Qi actually has no secrets in front of them because Zheng Qi is not here to be an undercover agent. Zheng Qi and others still know the familiar Zheng Qi, not a stranger. As Zheng Qi said, Liu Xiaoshan is indeed a good teammate, but if he can fight for the World Cup with Shen Ruofei and others, it will be the most pleasant thing. In the remaining 2 games, you have to work hard. Try to win 2 World Cups this year. We can't help you with this, but we can still help with the next one. Shen Ruofei said. Of course, I want to play that game, and I will win the championship. Zheng Qi said arrogantly. Why do I remember that you didn't win many championships? Zheng Qi asked back. Of course I won the championship if I wanted to. If I can't, there's nothing I can do. Zheng Qi replied. Zheng Qi was stunned, and then showed a contemptuous expression to Zheng Qi. After so many years, don't you know that you can't listen to everything he says? Shen Ruofei turned around and asked Zheng Qi. I was careless. Zheng Qi sighed. Zheng Qi smiled, extremely obscene. For the opponents in the World Cup, no one thought that Yuan Thong, who gave them a headache, was such a shameless and wretched guy in life. After all, in their minds, Yuan Thong was simply a forbearing and insidious big devil. Look at how Bayern lost unjustly. It was so miserable. After the Overlord team eliminated Bayern, the other 3 games also had results. Several strong teams won without any danger. Boca Juniors from Argentina, Chicago Bulls from the United States and Santos from Brazil became the remaining 4. This result also made European fans feel ashamed. This is the first time in many years that there is no European team in the semi-finals. You know, the overall level of European teams is definitely the strongest. 3 of the top 8 are from Europe, not to mention that they often have 2 or 3 teams in the second-tier teams every year who have the opportunity to rush into the quarter-finals. In this way, their advantage is very large. What about this year? Milan and Real Madrid, who had great hopes of entering the quarter-finals, were defeated by their opponents one after another, which made their hopes of occupying one more place in the quarter-finals fall through. Then in the quarter-finals, the best of the 3 European teams, Bayern, was defeated by Overlord, Dynamo Moscow was defeated by Boca Juniors, and Manchester United from the UK was defeated by Sanchez. The result was that the European teams were annihilated in this World Cup, which was very rare. After careful consideration, the strong teams in Europe found that the culprit for all this was none other than Overlord. They defeated the second-tier European teams that had a chance to win to the quarter-finals, and then eliminated Bayern, the strongest team in Europe. The most important thing was that their appearance was very sudden, leaving these European teams unprepared. Otherwise, at least Bayern would not have lost so unclearly. However, since they had already lost, there was no point in them tangling anymore, so in this case, all they wanted to do was observe this team carefully. At least, they would not suffer such a loss next year. The next 2 semi-finals will undoubtedly represent the top level. The opponent of the Overlords is Boca Juniors, while the Chicago Bulls and Santos will fight against each other. Boca Juniors is not one of the top 3 teams, but they are very famous this year because they have Maradona this year. As the most controversial and famous football king in the ancient football era, Maradona has always been very popular in the hearts of fans around the world. When the football era began to be created, although this controversial football king had passed away, some of his performances were still preserved, making countless people intoxicated. Every player who can get such a title must be extraordinary. This is almost a truth. In this case, Boca Juniors has a Maradona this year, which will certainly attract the attention of countless people. And the performance of Boca Juniors and Maradona did not disappoint anyone. After 5 games, Maradona's goals were not particularly many, but he also scored 13 goals in 5 games, and he was able to complete a hat-trick in almost every game. His assists were as high as 20 times, which fully demonstrated his comprehensiveness and top-level influence. Maradona performed so well, and of course he was surrounded by top teammates. This Boca Juniors team entered the World Cup this year after eliminating River Plate, which had entered the World Cup for 3 consecutive years. They were able to achieve such a good result after 3 years of dormancy, and there were too many outstanding players in their team. Maradona is the greatest player in Argentine history, and after a newcomer got such a title, his teammates began to change their names to the names of the greatest Argentine players, that is, the teammates of the king of football, except for a few positions. Goalkeeper Goshir, a legendary goalkeeper, has quick reactions and is good at saving penalties. Of course, the last point is meaningless now, because penalties rarely appear now, and once they appear, the goalkeeper basically can't save them. Passarella and Brown form a classic central defender combination. One sweeps and the other confronts head-on, and the cooperation between the two is quite tacit. The fullback position is Zheng and Zheng Qi. Both of them are tenacious and brave fullbacks with excellent fighting ability. Zheng is better in offense and Zheng Qi is stronger in defense, but the common feature of the two is that they can run up and down. In the midfield, Ron, Riquelme, and Bruchaga are all top midfielders who can attack and defend. Whether it is defending from behind, long pass counter-attack, short pass organization, or forward attack, they all have extremely outstanding performances. Their running ability is also very strong, enough to form interceptions in the midfield. In the front court, Maradona is of course their soul. He has a lot of balls, but he also passes a lot. Through his breakthroughs and passes, Maradona can give his teammates more opportunities, and Messi, who cooperates with him tacitly, also has similar abilities. He is even better in shooting, but he lacks the ability to lead the whole team. With these two players in the front court, plus a centre-forward Batistuta who can always score goals, Boca Juniors' offensive lineup is even better than Bayern's. Si estás escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significa lo descarga and y subir en esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 785. Great opportunity. If they're really that powerful, how come they were suppressed by the River Plate before? Lucian said unconvincedly after listening to Zheng Qi's analysis. Their previous offensive core was also a man named Messi, but he was old and in poor condition, so they were suppressed by the River Plate. Now Maradona and Messi are both newcomers, and they are extremely powerful as soon as they appear. In addition, their midfield and backcourt are not weak, so they have risen rapidly. From the game, Boca Juniors' offense is basically handed over to these two newcomers. The cooperation between them is very tacit and excellent, which drives the offense of the entire team. Zheng Qi replied. It sounds like it's very powerful. Lucian said disdainfully. Zheng Qi smiled and didn't say much. South American teams are not as rigorous as European teams as a whole, but they're really powerful in offense. The Overlord team is also good at offense, and it is unknown whether the Overlord team can continue to maintain its advantage in the offensive confrontation. Zheng Qi was very confident about this, but he hoped that Boca Juniors would also want to defend against the Overlord's offense. If they focus more on defense, they will naturally be in an advantageous position. However, Zheng Qi was not sure about this. The three European teams he met before all cared more about defense. This was because they were more rigorous and focused more on the balance between offense and defense. Therefore, even a wise player like Beckenbauer would unconsciously choose to consider the problem of defense. However, Beckenbauer had already noticed something wrong after the game. Would the American teams not notice it? Even if they didn't notice it, they would instinctively use offense to deal with the entire game. This was almost as natural as breathing for the South American teams. Anyway, even if they focus on attacking, we are not afraid of anything. Zheng Qi muttered in a low voice. What did you say? Lucian asked. Nothing was said. You're in good shape, right? Don't drag our offense down in the game. Zheng Qi said. Damn, I just didn't score a goal in one game, and I sacrificed myself to help you distract your attention. You questioned me like this. Where's humanity? Where's conscience? Lucian opened his eyes wide. Why do you slander someone's innocence out of thin air? It's good as long as the state is good. In this game, the competition should be the goal-scoring ability of both sides. Zheng Qi quickly changed the subject. In fact, Boca Juniors has reached such a consensus on this point. They are good at attacking themselves, there is no doubt about this. Just looking at their personnel composition can see that although the three players in the midfield are both offensive and defensive, they are still more inclined to attack after all. They are all very comprehensive players, but they all have their own best places. Ron's best is his long shot, Riquelme's best is his breakthrough, and Bruchaga's best is his follow-up response. These 3 points are more conducive to attacking. Needless to say, Batistuta's skills are average, but he is an excellent shooter, which is somewhat similar to Muller. His scoring ability is not as good as Muller, but his confrontation and running are a little stronger. Even on the back line, therefore defenders are good at attacking. Zheng's long shot, Zheng Qi's breakthrough, Passarella and Brown's headers in the opponent's penalty area. From this perspective, their offensive ability is even better than Bayern. Of course, as the strongest team in Europe, Bayern is excellent in both offensive and defensa, and in the game against the Overlord, they were distracted by defensa, so their offensa was affected to a certain extent. If they really go all out to attack the Overlord team, Bayern's offensive ability will also be very strong. If the full score for offensive and defensa is 50 points, then Bayern may be able to get 49 points for both, and the total score can reach 98 points. What about Boca Juniors? Their offensa may be able to get 50 points, but the defensa can only get 40 points, and the total score is at most 90 points. From this perspective, Bayern is much more difficult to deal with than Boca Juniors. If the Overlord team can beat Bayern, then beating Boca Juniors will not be a big problem. But in Zheng Qi's opinion, it is not the case. The offensive ability of the Overlord team can be said to have exceeded the limit of 50 points. Even if the opponent's defensa is 50 points, they can still score goals. So it doesn't make much difference whether the opponent's defensa is 40 points or 50 points. But if the opponent's offensa is 50 points or 49 points, the difference is very big. We don't care whether we can defend their offensa. It's meaningless. What's our meaning? In offensa, we are the great Boca youth. Offensa is our lifeblood. Without offensa, there is no us. The Overlord team's offensa is excellent, perhaps better than Bayern and other teams, but are we afraid of them? No, compared to offensa, we are not afraid of anyone, so concentrate on offensa, and in defensa, just play to our level. Maradona said to his teammates. Although compared with others, he is the youngest, only 20 years old, 1 year younger than Messi, but whether it is the oldest captain Passarella, or the two respected fullbacks Zanetti and Serin, at this time, they listened to him very seriously. So are we going to attack in this game? Passarella asked. Of course, we must attack, focus on attacking, and try to score goals every time we attack. In the last game, the Overlords beat Bayern in this way. I want to see if they can beat us in this way. In terms of the ability to seize offensive opportunities, we are no worse than anyone else, and we can even say that we are the best. Maradona said confidently. Then do we have any tactics to defend their key players? Zanetti thought for a while and asked. No need for special tactics. Anyway, when defending, we just need to mark people. We should not always think about whether we can resist the opponent's attack, but think about how to tear open the opponent's defensa. I will pass the ball to you. The Overlords have two terrible shooters, but we have the most complete offensive firepower. I don't mind playing a big game with them, as long as we can score one more goal in the end, that's fine. Maradona said. The Overlords have big scores in every game. From this aspect, they are really good at attacking. Serin disagreed a little. Yes, from this point of view, it is not wise to attack them head-on, but what are the consequences of trying to contain their defensive team? Maradona asked. Serin was speechless. If the efforts made by Milan and Real Madrid in defensa were ineffective because of their overall weak level, everyone saw Bayern's efforts in defensa. Such outstanding defensive players, plus an absolutely top-notch Beckenbauer, still failed to withstand the fierce attack of the Overlord team. Such a team couldn't control the attack of the Overlord team, let alone Boca Juniors. Although Boca Juniors is now very confident and feels that they are fully capable of winning the World Cup, they will not say that their defensa is stronger than Bayern. In terms of overall strength, they are confident in their team, but in terms of defensa, they say they are better than the top teams in Europe. That's a joke. Everyone knows that South American teams rely more on individuals for defensa, while European teams rely on individuals and overall excellence for defensa. Although in the current classical football matches, individual ability seems to be more important than the overall, when individual abilities are similar, the team with a better overall performance will always have some advantages. So if Bayern can't stop the Overlord team's attack, then they certainly can't stop it either. In this case, not strengthening their own offensa but strengthening their own defensa is undoubtedly a matter of losing sight of the main goal. We are good at attacking, but we are not very good at defensa, and it is difficult to control the attack of the Overlord team. So what we have to do is to seize every opportunity in attacking, and then wait for the opponent to make mistakes. Do you understand? In this case, it is more important for us to seize every opportunity. On defensa, we just need to maintain our usual style. Brown does not need to specifically mark Chen Fengxiao in the midfield. He should defend in the zone and stand in his position. On offensa, he should change positions flexibly. Their defensa is still relatively rigid, and they are used to guarding within their own range. This is also an opportunity for us to attack. Maradona continued to speak, and the players of Boca Juniors nodded one after another. On defense, they only need to pay attention to a few points, and the focus is still on offense. This is the tactic arranged by Maradona. How is it, are you absolutely sure? Messi asked Maradona in a low voice. How can there be absolute certainty? Maradona laughed dumbly. That is the team that defeated Bayern. That is also a top team, no one can be absolutely sure to win. Messi nodded. But as long as we play well, there will always be a chance to win. Even if we have a high success rate, we won't score every time we attack. Through pressure and running, we can interfere with their defense, but don't be too distracted. As long as we can improve our goal rate, then we will have a great chance of winning. Maradona added. The overlords probably think so too. Messi thought for a while and said. We are all good at attacking, so of course we need to do better, and then leave everything else to God. Maradona shrugged. Anyway, if we can get past the overlords, our chances of winning the World Cup will be very high. Messi said excitedly. Nonsense, if we beat them, we will enter the finals, so the possibility is of course high. Maradona glanced at him. Chapter 786 Dark Horse. If we beat Boca Juniors, we can enter the finals. Come on, everyone. Zheng Qi said. That's nonsense. If we don't beat them, we will go home directly. Lucian said. Don't argue. I just said that there is a game every 2 days recently. Everyone may start to feel a little bored and tired. So in the next period of time, we only need to play 2 more games to be relieved. Aren't you very happy? Zheng Qi said. Boss, don't make a fuss. This is the World Cup. We have won all the way. How can we feel bored? We wish we could keep winning like this. B.A. Wang said. The other players of the B.A. Wang team nodded one after another. This was what they said in their hearts. Their previous dream was to go 1 step further in the Chinese competition. Now they can go 1 step further in the World Cup. How can there be any pretentiousness or boredom? Well, everyone is so excited, I feel relieved. Tomorrow is the game against Boca Juniors. Let's fight with them and see who scores more goals. Zheng Qi waved his fist and said loudly. When the players of Overlord team responded, Lucian looked at Zheng Qi in surprise. Are you asking this because you feel a little tired? Lucian asked privately. A little bit, Bayern disappointed me a little. They are almost the strongest team in Europe. Can our level crush the best team in the world? Zheng Qi replied. The tactics are right. If we play another game, we may not be able to beat them. Lucian replied. But our level is much better than the best players in the world, right? Zheng Qi continued to ask. Well, I can't deny this, Lucian replied. Indeed, after defeating Bayern, at least now in the eyes of various classical football giants, Overlord team is undoubtedly a strong team, one of the strongest teams in the world. When facing any team, they may win or lose, but they will never be at a disadvantage. Such a team can certainly represent the highest level in the world. But everyone also knows that compared with the outstanding overall level of other teams, the overall level of the Overlord team is weaker. However, because of Zheng Qi and Lucian, they can be compared with the top teams in the world. You know, even the top teams have core players, important players and ordinary players. Take Bayern for example. Their core player is Beckenbauer, and Beckenbauer is also recognized as one of the best players in the world. He is also a genius player who can only be produced once every 10 years. Then there are important players such as Müller. In terms of the abilities of other important players, Bayern is much better than the players of the Overlord team. Not to mention complete suppression, at least there is an advantage. In the words of classical football in the past, the players of the Overlord team are ordinary professional players, while the players of Bayern are all-star level players. Although the strength between stars and ordinary professional players in the past classical football professional competitions is getting closer and closer, the stars still have to be better in performance. Overall, Bayern has an absolute advantage. However, it is because of the performance of the 2 important players of the Overlord team that they can keep pace with such a strong team. Isn't this enough to show that Zheng Qi and Lucian, 2 perverts, are better than the best players in the world? In fact, it's not necessarily that our skills and performance are better than theirs. We have too much advantage in attributes. Lucian said. Yes, at least more than 100 points of attribute advantage. It is indeed a big advantage, but it is also because we are not worse than them in terms of technology that we can have such an advantage, right? Is this the level of the top level now? Zheng Qi sighed. I'm a little disappointed. There's no way. Classical football is not really professional now, so of course it is much worse in training and cultivation. You know the difference between professional and amateur, and there is another problem. The most capable people have all gone to play professional games. Those who come to play classical football can be said to have been filtered out once, so there are naturally fewer talented players left. Lu Xiaoshan said. Yes, so I am even more disappointed about this. Zheng Qi laughed. Lu Xiaoshan didn't know why he said that. Zheng Qi certainly wouldn't say that he planned to stop playing professional football games after this year and concentrate on playing classical football. He even wanted to promote the formation of a professional league for classical football. In fact, he just felt a little bored and thought that the level of classical football was a little poor in his opinion. The higher the level of the game, the more people can be attracted to watch it. The professional football game of the football era is the only professional game in the football era game that is recognized by the system. This provides a lot of convenience for the formation of the professional football game of the football era. It is almost impossible for other competitive games to obtain such convenience. Therefore, in terms of development, other games have been left far behind by the professional football game of the football era. However, for Zheng Qi, the more difficult the thing is, the more he wants to do it. And if he really announces his retirement from professional games and plays classical football next year, with his current fame, he can also attract many people. Just thinking of this, Zheng Qi feels that he should be more optimistic. And this World Cup, he is determined to win it. No matter who his opponent is, he will win it. After winning the World Cup, he will announce his true identity next year, which will naturally cause a bigger sensation and attract more people to pay attention to the classical football game. Although Zheng Qi did not prepare for these things, he naturally took all the factors into consideration, which is also his instinct. The legendary Maradona, I hope he can perform better and contribute to a wonderful game with us. If Maradona knew what Zheng Qi was thinking at the moment, he would probably be very angry, because his idea seemed to be that he didn't take Boca Youth seriously at all, just treating Boca Youth as a prop. Of course, Zheng Qi would not say such words publicly, he was not arrogant to this extent. Moreover, he was also very cautious about Boca Youth. Although the opponent was not a traditional top 3 team, the fact that they could produce a player with the title of Maradona was enough to prove that they now had the strength to challenge the World Cup champion. If they underestimated the opponent against such a team, it would simply mean that they had won too much. This day passed in the training of the Overlord team. Tomorrow is the semi-final match, and of course no one will relax. At this stage of the World Cup of classical football, it no longer attracts fans of the 2 participating teams. It can be said that fans who are interested in classical football all over the world, regardless of their country, skin color, or beliefs, will pay attention to the next match. There is no 3rd or 4th place match in the current World Cup. In short, the team that can play all the games must be the team that enters the finals. No matter how outstanding and glorious the performance was before, if it fails to enter the finals, it will be forgotten. Both teams scored a lot of goals. Well, especially the Chinese team, the Overlords. After entering the top 32, they averaged double-digit goals in each of the 5 games. It's terrifying. Boca Juniors is not bad either. They averaged 7.5 goals per game before, and they hold the record for the most goal scorers in this tournament. 11 players on the field, except for goalkeeper Bashir, the other 10 scored in the game, including the 2 defenders, who scored the most points. In short, there must be a lot of goals in this game. It's worth watching. Discussions like these kept appearing in a media forum dedicated to discussing classical football. The annual World Cup is a big deal for fans of classical football, and the discussion will become more and more intense as time goes by, because the teams of classical football have no professional teams, resulting in a great change in their strength. Many teams may replace a batch of players every year, and even die-hard fans may not be able to clearly understand the movements of all teams. Only in the World Cup every year can you see their changes and their movements. Those teams that are not strong enough or unlucky will soon be eliminated, and those strong teams will become the real focus and be followed by many fans. The better the performance, the more eye-catching the performance, and the more exciting the game, the more attention the team will receive. This is the charm of the Cup. The teams that rise in the Cup have attracted fans with their recent performance, but the league is different. The league will have fixed fans, but the Cup will not have fixed fans. So in the next 2 semi-finals, the most discussed match is the match between the Overlords and Boca Juniors. On the contrary, in the other semi-final, although the 2 participating teams are 2 top teams, because their previous performance was not particularly eye-catching, the discussion is far less than this game. This new team is still able to attract a lot of attention. That's normal. Any new team with such performance will attract countless attention. This is the charm of the Cup competition. Any team that performs well enough will be able to have enough discussion. If such discussion can continue until the end of the cup competition, they will be the big winners of this competition. Boca Juniors is actually very popular as well. Of course, because they are also a team that brings surprises. Which of these two surprising teams can make it to the end? This is a very attractive topic in itself. To use the old saying, this should be called a dark horse, right? That's right, now it's time to see which dark horse is darker. Chapter 787. Collective and individual. In fact, it is a little inappropriate to describe the Overlords and Boca Juniors as dark horses. What is a dark horse? A dark horse is a team that no one is optimistic about before the game starts, but performs well in the game and sprints to the end. It is called a dark horse. What about the Overlords and Boca Juniors? They are both 8-seeded teams. In the World Cup with 128 teams from all over the world, they can get the status of the top 8 seeds. What results are they supposed to achieve? However, in fact, many fans know that it is not rare to say that they are dark horses. Their seed status is because their division is too strong, and they naturally get the seed status. Otherwise, the Overlords are participating in the World Cup for the first time. How can they be qualified to get the seed status? Boca Juniors has not been in the World Cup for several years. According to the previous classical football scoring standards, they can never become a seeded team. That is to say, now the level of seeded teams is divided according to the country. In fact, this is not unscientific, but it is also because of this division that they can be seeded teams. Compared with other seeded teams, the status of these two teams as seeded teams seems a little unreliable and unconvincing. However, their performance in the World Cup did not lose face for the seeded teams at all. It was fine that they had defeated other weak teams all the way. Even if the teams that made it out of China and Argentina did not have outstanding performances in the World Cup before, there was no doubt that they had the strength to crush weak teams. However, after the top 32 matches, they were able to occupy the first place in the group stage, which was amazing. After all, in the group stage, they all encountered second-tier teams with relatively outstanding strength, but they were still able to suppress the opponent. This in itself is a very remarkable thing, proving that their status as seeded teams is well deserved. In the knockout rounds, their performance was also quite outstanding. The Overlords, needless to say, were defeated by Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, both of which were excellent teams. Bayern Munich, in particular, was the No. 1 seed of the World Cup, but they were still defeated by the Overlords. Boca Juniors also performed well. They first eliminated Milan and then Dynamo Moscow. Milan is one of the strongest teams in the second-tier teams, and although Dynamo Moscow is not one of the top 3, it is also an important competitor for the World Cup champion. Their victory is enough to prove their level. At the beginning of the game, they made people feel that they were somewhat unworthy at their reputation, but now, they have reached the semi-finals and achieved excellent results. It seems normal to be called a dark horse for such a performance. Compared with other teams, they are indeed dark horses. Now, these two dark horses have met, and they are both dark horses that play beautifully and score a lot of goals. What kind of sparks will collide in the semi-finals is very exciting. Therefore, at the beginning of the game, there were quite a lot of fans in the stands. In addition to the fans of both teams, there were also a large number of neutral fans. They all came to enjoy the game. They might support a certain team, but it would not prevent them from cheering for the other team's outstanding performance in the game. Obviously, when there are more fans, the atmosphere of the stadium will be very good, but the die-hard fans of both sides are a bit embarrassed. They are confronting each other, but a group of fence-sitters around them cheer loudly. How can they confront each other? However, the players of the Overlord team and the players of Boca Juniors don't care about this. They only care about the next game. Focus and kill them with our offense, Maradona said in the locker room. Don't think too much, just attack well. Our offense is the strongest. Zheng Qi said in the locker room. The offensive cause of both sides emphasized the importance of offensive in the last sentence. For this, other players did not have any other opinions. After all, for them, they also believed that if they wanted to win, they had to improve their level in offense. So it is natural to focus on the offense. No matter what, the offensive effect must be guaranteed first. The players of both sides came out to the cheers of the stands. The fans of both sides and the neutral fans in the stands all cheered loudly. The fans of both sides wanted to see victory, and the neutral fans wanted to see a wonderful game. Zheng Qi waved to the stands, causing a cheer from the stands. However, soon, on the other side of the stands, there were even crazier shouts. Maradona waved to the stands, and the Argentine fans immediately shouted crazily. Although their number is much smaller than that of Chinese fans really won't shout crazily like this. Damn, are these people crazy? Zheng Qi said. It is said that Argentines will go crazy when they hear the name of Maradona. Lu Xiaoshan said beside him. Ah, I have seen the game video of this man, but it is very ancient. Zheng Qi thought about it and said. Is it very powerful? Lu Xiaoshan asked. Indeed, I still can't master his outside foot pass very well, and can only use it occasionally. Zheng Qi said. That skill is really difficult. When the ball is kicked out, it has a clear arc in the air. It flies very fast, but it slows down quickly after landing, allowing teammates to easily control the ball. This kind of subtle control is really difficult to master. Lu Xiaoshan thought about it and admitted it. Yes, this is not something that can be done by improving physical fitness. The ball sensor's too strong. Zheng Qi replied. But no matter how great that person is, he is not the guy on the field now. When we defeat him later, I don't know what those Argentines in the stands will think. You are very cruel. Lu Xiaoshan said. Shouldn't it be? Zheng Qi laughed. Just defeat him, why do you have to look at other people's faces? Your idea is wrong. You have no competitive spirit at all. Lu Xiaoshan said righteously. Zheng Qi gave him a middle finger. Is this the way you greet each other? Maradona, who had already walked in front of Zheng Qi, asked curiously. Looking at this young man with curly hair and an innocent smile on his face, Zheng Qi laughed. No, this is just a special way of greeting him and me. It is more insulting than the middle finger anywhere else, but it doesn't matter between two friends. Zheng Qi replied. Maradona retracted his middle finger, which had been half extended, and said nonchalantly. Oh, I thought it was a special way of greeting in your country. After shaking hands with Maradona, Zheng Qi snorted in his heart. Want to trick me? It's not that easy. Zheng Qi thought in his heart. What a pity, this guy reacts so quickly. Maradona thought in his heart. This short confrontation that didn't seem like a confrontation made both sides feel a certain degree of vigilance against each other. Maradona at least knew that this person reacted quickly, and Zheng Qi at least knew that this person had a very active mind. As the core of the offensive, such characteristics play an extremely important role. Whether it is a flexible mind or a quick reaction, it is a top quality in the game. I heard that not only Maradona, but their Messi is also very good. Fortunately, we have you two on our team. Overlord said to Zheng Qi in the team channel. Really? Then we have to work harder and suppress them. Zheng Qi laughed. Don't worry, although we are not important players, we will try our best to hold back other opponents. We will fully support you and send the ball into their goal again and again. B.A. Wang said. No problem. Zheng Qi laughed. The players of both sides began to disperse on the field. From the formation point of view, both sides are March 4, 2003 formations, but many people know that in the last game, Zheng Qi was basically a front court freeman, while B.A. Wang and Long Qi were also very active in the front court. When defending, they would return to the midfield to help defend, and when attacking, they would go to the penalty area to help Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan distract the attention of the opponent's defense line. The positions of other people are also very active and not confined to their own positions. This approach has affected the defense of the B.A. Wang team to a certain extent, but in terms of offensive, it seems more threatening and can better distract the attention of the opponent. It must be said that this approach makes the offensive of the B.A. Wang team more threatening and reduces the defensive pressure faced by Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan. This tactic had basically never been used before, but the Overlord team showed such an effect in the game in a unique way, which gave those teams who wanted to defend them a headache, but also make people admire them. When the Overlord team players shook hands with each other, they also felt the attention of each other. The players of Boca Juniors did not focus all their attention on Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan, because they also knew that no matter how good the core was, the game was not played by one or two people. This is a collective confrontation, not an individual confrontation. Everyone in their own position, devoting their greatest ability, can make the whole team gain an advantage and finally hit the victory. The reason why football has occupied a mainstream position in the past sports is that while paying attention to skills, they pay more attention to teamwork. These things cannot be trained by one or two top players behind closed doors, but rely on the improvement of the overall level. There are individual heroes, but the most important thing is still the overall toughness. Even in the ancient football era, when a star changes a game, it also requires the efforts of teammates. The same is true in today's football matches. No matter how strong an opponent is, you dare not leave the others alone to focus on guarding him alone, otherwise, the others will teach you a lesson. Chapter 788. Using the team to suppress the individual. When the players of both sides were scattered on the field, the fans in the stands began to cheer collectively, waiting for the start of the next exciting game. For this point, both the fans of both sides and the neutral fans were very confident. They all knew that with the offensive capabilities of both sides and the level of offensive players, it would be abnormal if this game was not an exciting confrontation. So after cheering, they sat down one after another, especially the neutral fans, who were ready to watch a wonderful game. They kicked off first. Let's feel their offensive strength, Zheng Qi said in the team channel. Opposite him, Messi and Batistuta stood at the kickoff point, and Maradona was slightly behind. Among their three forwards, Batistuta is at the front. Messi and Maradona's positions are very active, and their three midfielders are also very active, but they all tend to attack in the middle, and the wing is handed over to the two fullbacks, so when we defend, we must pay attention to the defender in the middle, Zheng Qi said in the team channel. But they also attack a lot on the wing, Zheng said with some doubts. In the final analysis, we still have to go through the middle, so the defender of the wing will be handed over to you two, and more of us will focus on the middle, Zheng Qi said. Zheng and Thongime nodded at the same time. They were only defending on the wing. If there was no one to help, they would be under great pressure. However, even if the wing was broken through, the impact would not be particularly large. The attack launched on the wing, in the final analysis, still had to go to the middle to score, so the defender of the middle was the most important. Zheng Qi's judgment was no problem. The whistle for the start of the game sounded, Batistuta passed the ball to Messi, and Messi passed it back to Maradona. Lucian rushed over first, followed closely by the overlord. Maradona received the ball, he turned around and passed the ball back, and Boca Juniors began to attack when Ron got the ball. Riquelme and Brushaga both started to move forward, and on the two wings, Sorin and Zanetti's positions had already begun to move forward. These guys are really aggressive when they attack. The players of the Overlord team thought to themselves. Just one teammate behind got the ball, and the others had already rushed into the opponent's half. This approach can only prove that they're really passionate about attacking. In fact, the Overlord team often does the same when attacking, but they dared to do so when Zheng Qi got the ball. When Lucian saw Maradona pass the ball, he immediately continued to rush forward, trying to press Ron who had the ball, causing him to have some problems in organization. Ron was not in a hurry, and waited until he was about to get close to him, then he raised his foot and passed the ball to Zanetti who was advancing on the wing. Zanetti started to dribble forward, Yinbu moved sideways to intercept him, and saw someone coming to defend him, so Zanetti passed the ball to Riquelme who was temporarily unguarded in the middle. Riquelme got the ball, looked up and saw Batistuta had moved towards the penalty area, and immediately raised his foot and passed the ball directly into the penalty area before Jibu came to defend. Zhang Qi ran after Batistuta and jumped up with him. However, Batistuta's timing of jumping was better than his. As he jumped, he passed the ball directly down. The ball flew to the front of the penalty area. Maradona rushed to that position, and Zheng Qi followed Maradona closely, trying to block him from getting the ball. The two kept fighting while running. Zheng Qi felt that the opponent's attribute points were at a disadvantage compared to his own, but he was always able to avoid his collision and not have a very good effect. The reaction is very good, Zheng Qi thought to himself. Fortunately, I can dodge it. Maradona thought to himself. The two rushed to the landing point of the ball at the same time. In a very short time, the two arrived almost at the same time. The next moment, Maradona raised his foot while running and poked the ball out first. The ball flew diagonally into the penalty area. Messi, who was advancing, blocked Washu who was returning to defense behind him, and faced the flying ball and shot directly in the air. A beautiful goal. Maradona's narrow assist and Messi's wonderful goal. Less than a minute after the start, Boca Juniors scored the first goal. This was a wonderful attacking cooperation. Ron passed the ball to Zanetti, Zanetti passed it to Riquelme, Riquelme picked the ball to Batistuta, Batistuta headed the ball, Maradona immediately passed it diagonally into the penalty area, and Messi volleyed the ball without stopping. Wonderful cooperation. Amid the shouts of the commentator, the players of Boca Juniors began to cheer and run in the field. The players of the Overlord team looked at each other and felt that the opponent's attack was indeed very good. The goal just now began to be played repeatedly above the stands. It was played from various angles. Everyone had to admit that this goal was indeed a very wonderful team cooperation goal. In addition to team cooperation, the individual level of the Boca Juniors players was also demonstrated, especially Maradona's diagonal pass, which was extremely wonderful. Whether it was the strength of the pass or the angle, it was difficult for Messi to score so easily under the interference of Zheng Qi. The teamwork is really good, but we are not bad either. Let's launch a counter-attack and equalize the score. Zheng Qi said in the team channel. Okay, what should we do? Zheng Qi asked. After the kickoff, pass the ball to me and let's run actively. Zheng Qi replied. I thought you wanted to show our cooperation. Zheng Qi was a little speechless. No matter what method we use to attack, if we score a goal, it is a successful attack, and if we don't score a goal, it is a failed attack. Do you understand? Zheng Qi said. I understand, the players of the Overlord team answered in unison. I don't know how they will attack, but this time, it's my turn to defend Gyon's Thong. Just now, I still made an assist under his defenser. What should he do? Maradona said in the Boca Juniors team channel after celebrating. Maybe he also wants to show his talent in assists. In the last game, he did score all the goals for the team, but that was because Bayern paid more attention to the defenser against Zheng Qi. Messi said after thinking about it. Maybe. Maradona nodded. Then I'll leave the defenser to you. But will it affect you if you mark Gyon's Thong while attacking? Ron asked in the team channel. If I am asked to defend him, I will try my best. Don't worry, since he will come to mark me when we attack, I can't show weakness. Maradona said confidently in the team channel. Even if I will consume some energy, the opponent's consumption is the same as mine. As long as we can hold him back, then we will not lose. After hearing what Maradona said, the others had nothing to say. Maradona usually did everything in the game. Such efforts were not too much pressure for him. The game started again soon. Ba Wang and Lu Xiaoshan kicked off. After the whistle sounded, Lu Xiaoshan received the pass from Ba Wang and quickly passed it back to Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi took the ball, and in front of him, Batistuta had already rushed forward. Zheng Qi raised his foot and made a passing motion, but his feet quickly pulled the ball horizontally, avoiding Batistuta who was approaching, and then brought the ball forward and broke through. Batistuta was broken through by Zheng Qi at once, but behind him, Maradona suddenly appeared. He came out at a very timely time, just when Zheng Qi was dribbling the ball, and was about to stretch his foot to cut off the ball. However, Zheng Qi's speed of advancement was still a little faster than he imagined. Zheng Qi barely kicked the ball first and flicked it horizontally, then continued to move forward, holding Maradona with his body, followed by Uziki who took the ball and passed it back at the first time, and Zheng Qi controlled the ball under his feet again. The timing of the interception was good. Zheng Qi said as he dribbled the ball forward. This is a beautiful pass. I didn't expect your footwork to be so fast. Maradona also replied. Although it seemed like they were chatting, both Zheng Qi and Maradona continued to concentrate on the game. Zheng Qi was dribbling the ball forward, while Maradona was constantly interfering with him beside him, affecting his progress. Pay attention to other people, don't give him a route to pass the ball, do you understand? Especially Zheng Qi, you must keep a close eye on him. While interfering with Zheng Qi and running back with him, Maradona directed others to defend in the team channel. Although the main focus is still on defensa, it does not mean that they will not defend at all. Giving up defensa is impossible, and creating enough trouble for the opponent in defensa is also a very important link. Although Bayern's previous games seemed a bit weak, they still hit some good ideas on defensa, such as cutting off Zheng Qi's passes to others, allowing him to show more personal abilities. Although Zheng Qi's personal ability is very strong, and he also scored all the goals very powerfully, but can he always do this? Maradona believes that Zheng Qi can't do this, and cutting off the connection between him and others is still of great significance. Zheng Qi wants to score, let him go in. Can he score more than a dozen goals alone, and suppress so many offensive players on our side? In the last game, Bayern was not prepared in this regard, but we are prepared, and we will definitely not lose to you in offensa. The ability of team offensa must be better than your personal offensive ability. This is Maradona's idea, to fully demonstrate the team offensive level of Boca Juniors, suppress the individual performance of the Overlord team, and then gain the overall offensive advantage. Chapter 789. Change of rhythm. In this attack, the Overlord team finally equalized the score. Under the interference of Maradona, Zheng Qi still dribbled the ball forward steadily. Although the passing route between him and others was cut off, especially Lu Xiaoshan, who was under the close defense of the two defenders of the opponent, he could not catch the ball no matter how much he ran. However, Zheng Qi showed a better state. After another sudden stop and acceleration, Zheng Qi temporarily shook off Maradona's defense and broke into the penalty area. Before Passarella came to fill the position, he decisively kicked the ball and the ball flew into the goal along the far post. The Overlord team equalized the score. What a wonderful performance! Compared with the team cooperation of Boca Juniors just now, the goal scored by the Overlord team is a reflection of individual ability. After receiving the ball, Yuan Thong broke through from the back court, then advanced all the way to 50 meters, broke into the penalty area and scored. In the process, he completely controlled the ball. Boca Juniors' defender was a little lax, and no one else came to defend him, allowing him to complete the shot alone. This is his 12th goal in this World Cup. Ever since he opened the floodgates in the last game, goals have started to come in continuously. This goal seems to be a reflection of personal ability, but in fact, overall coordination is also very important. The other players of the Overlord team have been constantly running, and it was under such running that the defensive attention of the other players of Boca Juniors was involved, and Chen Fengxiao attracted the opponent's two main central defenders alone. If not for this, Yuan Thong would not have been able to score so easily. In the previous games, the Overlord team has always played as a whole. Yuan Thong was responsible for organization, and Chen Fengxiao scored a lot of goals. However, in these games, the top level shown by other players of the Overlord team still played a big role. It was their outstanding performance that when the opponent focused on defending Yuan Thong and Chen Fengxiao, the Overlord team still had no shortage of goals. In the last game, Yuan Thong's individual performance was certainly the best, but it was also because of the preparation of the previous game that Bayer did not relax the defense of others. The commentators analyzed the goal just now. Everyone is not a fool. Of course, it can be seen that when Zheng Qi broke through, the players of Boca Juniors were running closely following their own defense targets, and did not specifically target Zheng Qi. It is obvious that they want to reduce the connection between Zheng Qi and his teammates and suppress him to personal performance. What effect this approach has depends on what will happen in the next game. Any defensive method may succeed or fail. If you don't try, no one knows what consequences will be faced next. The commentators were naturally very clear about this truth. In the final analysis, whatever defensive method Boca Youth used now was normal, as long as they thought they could interfere with the attack of the Overlord team well, that was enough. The Overlord team did not use any special tactics in defensa, but used the zone defensa they were used to, allowing the opponent to run and intersperse, just defending their position, and then trying to interfere with the opponent's team attack in this way. This kind of defensive method is certainly easy to be outnumbered by the opponent, but as long as the key position can be stuck, it will also play a key role at some times. It is obvious that the efforts of both sides in defense are far less than those in offensa. Defensa is just for luck, and offensa is what they think is the key to winning the game. Sure enough, in the next game, the Overlord team continued to defend with zone defensa. Each of them stood in their own position to meet the fierce attack of Boca Youth. Probably only Zheng Qi was doing something else. He followed Maradona closely, not moving an inch. Just staring at me can't cause any problems with our team's offensa, Maradona said with a smile while running. You are the most threatening person after all. If we keep an eye on you, your offensive operation will have some problems. Zheng Qi replied. But with your defensa, even without me, we can easily score a goal. Maradona was unshakable. Then we'll see. Zheng Qi laughed. Although he was chatting with Zheng Qi in a relaxed manner, Maradona began to be alert in his heart. Zheng Qi followed too closely. It is easy to say that he should not move an inch, but it is almost impossible to do it. From the last game, it can be seen that Roth is already the best and strongest midfielder in Europe, and even in the world in terms of man-to-man defensa ability. However, under his focused defensa, Zheng Qi still broke through whenever he wanted to break through and took the ball whenever he wanted to. With the little advantage of starting first, he could always get the ball first. When the ball was at his feet, it would be difficult for him to defend. Maradona also didn't think Zheng Qi could make him unable to get the ball. Even if he was better than himself in reaction and strength attributes, it would be difficult to do this. It was the same in the previous attack. Even if Zheng Qi was watching closely, he still got the chance to pass the ball by running, although it was only a split second. However, in this confrontation, he had been running with sudden stops, but every time, Zheng Qi was able to react immediately and catch up almost at the same time, leaving him no space to get the ball. How is it possible? Did he detect my running habits so quickly? That's why he prepared and made a prediction in advance? Maradona thought in his heart with some surprise. This was probably the only possibility. Thinking of this, Maradona couldn't help but feel fortunate. If Zheng Qi hadn't been exposed so quickly, and had made a prediction at a critical moment, his attack would have been destroyed and the entire game would have been greatly disturbed. However, before making such a decision and judgment, Maradona still needed to test it to see if it was really the same as his judgment. Zheng Qi made a prediction and preparation in advance through his running habits and rhythm. While Maradona was running, the other players of Boca Juniors started their own attack. They kept passing the ball. In the midfield, their three midfielders were good at passing the ball to attack and organize. So even though the Overlords had a good defensive position and were cautious, they still easily launched the attack through passing. Among the three midfielders of Boca Juniors, Riquelme's short pass, organization and long pass were the best, while Bruchaga's strengths were running and receiving. Vron's characteristics were between the two. He was worse than Riquelme in short pass, long pass and organization, and worse than Bruchaga in running and receiving. However, he had some characteristics of both sides. So in the constant passing and running, Vron seemed to get the ball a lot. He kept receiving the ball and then passed it out. Riquelme sometimes took the ball and broke through, and then passed it out. Bruchaga kept running and always responded beside them. Under the interlaced running and organization of these three people, Boca Juniors' offense was organized quite smoothly. In a short time, they reached the front court and then handed the ball to Sorin, who was advancing on the wing. Sorin started to break forward along the left road and ran into Zheng. Zheng cautiously met him and made a move to retreat at any time. This attitude was clearly shown. "I'm not afraid of your breakthrough. Anyway, I will not let you cut into the penalty area smoothly. As for the cross, I will not deliberately stop you." Seeing the opponent's actions, Sorin knew that even if he broke through, it would probably not have any effect. At this time, he saw Maradona running towards him. In theory, he should pass the ball at this time. However, Zheng Qi followed closely beside him, following very closely, and it was very likely that the ball would be intercepted. Then he saw Maradona stop suddenly, turn around and run back. It was obvious that Zheng Qi was not prepared for Maradona's running, and was thrown away by Maradona for a distance. Sorin didn't hesitate anymore, and immediately made a long pass in the air, which flew over Zheng Qi's head and flew in front of Maradona. Maradona stretched his foot to take off the ball, and before Zheng came to fill the position, he waded into the penalty area, and then quickly kicked the ball before Zhang Zhuan came over, and shot the ball into the lower right corner of the goal. Beautiful. Maradona's goal. The commentator shouted loudly. Another wonderful cooperation. After continuous passing and back passing, Sorin took the ball on the wing. Maradona's lateral running got rid of Zheng Qi's defender, and then received Sorin's timely and accurate pass. The next thing is simple, he broke into the penalty area and faced the goalkeeper to score. Boca Youth's attack was quite wonderful. Maradona waved his fist, then smiled and looked at Zheng Qi from a distance. "You are familiar with my rhythm so quickly, but if I never rely on my own rhythm to play football, I can also do things like rhythm changes very easily. The change just now was very wonderful, and I got rid of his defender in an instant." Messi came up and hugged Maradona, and then said, "The rhythm change I learned from you is very effective." Maradona replied with a smile. "That's my special trick." "You learned it so quickly." Messi was stunned. "Just a little bit, but it's enough." Maradona laughed. Messi shook his head speechlessly. He thought he was also a super genius, but compared with this guy, he was still a little bit behind. No wonder he was always a little bit behind him since he was a child. Sometimes it was really frustrating. However, with such a genius on the same team as me, the possibility of winning owners would be much greater, right? In today's classical football games, what else can we pursue besides owners? Chapter 790. Using the individual to counter the whole. You got rid of it so easily. You're so weak. Lucian said to Zheng Qi in the team channel. "Oh, I didn't expect him to change the rhythm suddenly, it's interesting." Zheng Qi smiled and replied, "Let's not talk about it first, attack. Attack." The players of the Overlord team waved their fists and shouted. The opponent scored again. What should we do? Of course, we will attack again to tie the score. Now that the opponent has no problems in attack, we certainly can't have any problems. Although no team can score every time they attack, in the current situation, even if there will be mistakes, they must be less than the number of mistakes made by the opponent. Otherwise, they will be at a disadvantage in the game. The players of the Overlord team are very clear about this. In the last game, the Overlord team did not make mistakes, but the mistakes only occurred after they had established enough advantages, which gave the Overlord team a great psychological advantage in the game. Bayard actually failed to grasp an attack at the beginning, and was suppressed by the Overlord team, causing them to suffer a huge psychological blow from top to bottom, and finally collapsed in the second half and lost. Now Boca Juniors has obviously learned this lesson. They are very cautious when attacking and don't want to miss any attack. In this case, the Overlord team certainly can't make any mistakes, otherwise, they will be the ones who are under psychological pressure. The game resumed. Zheng Qi quickly got the ball, and then began to choose to break forward. In fact, you can also receive the ball after passing it. Didn't I receive the ball just now? Maradona said to Zheng Qi while interfering with him. That doesn't overlap with your style. How can this be? I'm unique. Zheng Qi replied. Very arrogant, Maradona sighed. Maradona's close defensa did not bring much pressure to Zheng Qi. After all, Zheng Qi still has advantages in attributes such as strength. The attribute advantage of more than 100 points allows him to easily stop Maradona in a position where he can't interfere with himself in the confrontation. You can't defend me alone, and you really don't want your teammates to come up to help. Zheng Qi began to stimulate Maradona in turn. If you have the ability, you can keep scoring like this. Maradona laughed. After hearing this, Zheng Qi decided not to be polite anymore. You made a big mistake. Zheng Qi said to Maradona. I'm so scared. Maradona replied. The next moment, Zheng Qi first made an emergency stop, then accelerated and sprinted, immediately leaving Maradona behind. Maradona was also helpless about this. He believed that if he did this, Zheng Qi would be left behind without any resistance, but as long as other players from the Overlord team interfered, Zheng Qi would be able to catch up. But that was because the Overlord team used regional defensa, and there would always be someone to interfere at key positions. Even if Maradona's breakthrough ability was also excellent, he couldn't break through so smoothly under Zheng Qi's interference. And what about Zheng Qi? He could do this because other players from the Overlord team would use running to clear the way for him. After breaking through to the front of the penalty area, someone came up to interfere with Zheng Qi. The one who came up to defend was Passarella. Zheng Qi raised his foot and made a fake pass to Lucian, who was running over to receive the ball. Passarella's attention was involuntarily distracted. Zheng Qi easily pulled the ball back, then dodged a shooting gap from Passarella and shot decisively. The angle of this shot was extremely tricky. Although Boyshia made the first reaction, before his hand stretched out to the fullest, the ball had already flown past his hand and flew into the blind corner of the goal. The Overlords have equalized the score. Yuan's Thong scored twice. One-on-one defensa is meaningless to Yuan's Thong, which was clear in the last game, but why did Boca Juniors still use Maradona alone to defend Yuan's Thong? Even if the others cannot relax their defensa, they cannot let him break through and score goals alone, right? A commentator said in confusion that although Zheng Qi showed extremely outstanding personal ability in these two goals, it was indeed strange that he was not disturbed by others. The involvement of other Overlord players is very important. They have effectively involved the defensive attention of other Boca Juniors players, but this is not a conflict. It is natural to deploy more people in the most critical position. After all, even if any opponent is left alone, it will cause problems on the team's defense line, but at a distance, leaving it alone will not cause too many problems. However, Boca Juniors seems to stubbornly adopt the man-to-man tactics, so that no one in the Overlords will be left unguarded. This choice is indeed strange. Do you want me to be soft? I'm a cold-blooded person. Zheng Qi said to Maradona with a smile. Maradona did not answer. They can't be so naive, can they? Lucian, who ran past Zheng Qi, asked in the private chat out of curiosity. Of course not. Besides, even if they concentrate their forces to defend the penalty area, it will be meaningless. If there are too many people in the penalty area, then the outer defense line will appear too empty. I can get space by just passing the ball. At the time, it will be time for me to score a goal with a rotating ball. Zheng Qi replied. No wonder they would rather keep an eye on most of our people even if the penalty area is empty, Lucian suddenly realized. Also, they don't want you to score again. You already have 30 goals. If you set a record again, how can you catch up in the future? As for me, although I scored 11 inches the last game, it is already difficult to expand such a record again. Zheng Qi said. These foreigners are really bad. They just don't want us Chinese to be awesome. Lucian said. Well, this makes sense. After a few meaningless words, Zheng Qi and Lucian returned to their own half at the same time. Defensa is up to you. Lucian said to Zheng Qi. Well, if we can cut Maradona out, then we would probably have some advantages in defensa. Zheng Qi nodded. It's useless for them to cut you out. Lu Xiaoshan laughed. Yeah. Zheng Qi also laughed. It's useless to cut Zheng Qi out, this sounds a bit wrong. After all, Zheng Qi has always been the core of the organization of the Overlord team. It's useless to cut him out. The fact is that in the previous games of the Overlord team, Zheng Qi played the role of backcourt connection. In the end, it was Lu Xiaoshan who solved the problem. So as long as Lu Xiaoshan is still in the overall offensive, even if the Overlord team shifts the focus of the offensive from Zheng Qi, there will be no big problem. And what about Zheng Qi's own offensive? There is even less problem. He always breaks through with the ball by himself. What does it matter if he is cut off from others? If the opponent concentrates its forces to defend Zheng Qi, then Zheng Qi will also have a good way to deal with it, that is, to pass the ball quickly, and then the others and Lu Xiaoshan will score together. This offensive method is also what the Overlord team is good at. They have always played like this before. Even if Zheng Qi's support and dispatch are missing, there will be no big problem. This is the key factor that Zheng Qi dares to take all the attacks by himself. If there is no such factor, even if Zheng Qi is bold, he dare not attack alone all the time. It is precisely because of this consideration that Boca Youth stubbornly adopts the man-to-man tactics, just to prevent the Overlord team from exerting all their strength in offensive. Compared with Zheng Qi's personal offensive, the overall offensive threat of the Overlord team is the greatest, because not only Lu Xiaoshan can finish the game, but the level of others can also be played very well. In such a game, their performance is the most headache for Boca Youth. And Zheng Qi's attack alone, no matter how strong he is, can he seize the opportunity every time. You have to know that Maradona's defensor is not vegetarian, and others will help and assist. In this case, Zheng Qi wants to score goals through personal breakthroughs, and his consumption is also very large. Such consumption may not be a big deal for Zheng Qi in 1 or 2, or even 4 or 5 attacks, but can he grasp every time in more than 10 or 20 attacks in the whole game? At least even if Maradona has absolute confidence in himself, he feels that it is difficult for him to grasp all of them. You have to know that people are lazy and inertial. In repeated attacks, there will always be some problems. These problems can be said to be difficult for everyone to avoid. No matter how good Zheng Qi is, there will be some mistakes. Compared with Zheng Qi's personal attack, Boca Youth's team attack is of course more reliable. Boca Youth wants to rely on the overall attack to suppress Zheng Qi's personal attack. They are betting that the success rate of Boca Youth's overall attack will be better than the success rate of Zheng Qi's personal attack. In theory, their idea is correct. Lu Xiaoshan said to Zheng Qi. Theory is theory, and reality is reality. In reality, I won't make mistakes, and their defensive pressure is too small for me to make mistakes. Zheng Qi laughed. They will notice this sooner or later. Lu Xiaoshan nodded, and then said to Zheng Qi. When the time comes, it will be your turn to perform. So even though I will be the one to complete the attack next, you should not relax at all, because I will need you to take over at any time and take over my offensive banner. You're pretending to be a revolutionary veteran. Just pay attention to the spirit, do you understand? Zheng Qi laughed. Chapter 791. The World Cup compared with the whole is more important than the individual in theory. As a team sport, football has always been more important for the whole. The role of the individual is also very important. However, with the development of football in the past, the more it develops, the more it proves the importance of improving the overall level, not just relying on the individual. In the current game, the role of the individual has begun to improve, which is actually a necessity after the overall development. When the overall level is similar, the improvement of the individual level has become a key to winning the game. So even if the whole is the most important in theory, football games have never been a one-size-fits-all thing. What is more effective is what is more important. Such a status changes with different situations. What's more, as Zheng Qi said, although he launched the attack as an individual, his other teammates never relaxed and were ready to take over the task of attacking from his feet. On the surface, it is the individual, but in fact, it is still a manifestation of the whole. The involvement of others will actively attract Boca Juniors defensive players to a farther place, and Boca Juniors players have to follow them, because if they don't follow them, once Zheng Qi passes the ball, the opponent can create a huge threat through long shots from a farther place. As mentioned before, the way to shoot a spinning ball is not a secret. Many players can master it after training, but the success rate is relatively low, and they can't shoot a perfect spinning ball in a very short time under the interference of the opponent's defensor. However, if you leave the opponent empty and give the opponent enough time to prepare and adjust, the probability of the opponent scoring a goal will be much greater. These causes and consequences, Boca Juniors had already thought clearly before the game started, and they had reached a consensus before letting Zheng Qi fall into a cycle of personal avance, letting him relax unconsciously. Of course, top players will not be soft, but they may fall into a fixed mindset, and then change the defensive method. It is easy to have a miraculous effect. With this in mind, the game between the two sides and the remaining time at the first half began to become more and more intense, but it seemed to be repeated scene by scene. Boca Juniors sent the ball to the front court through continuous passes, and then began to pass the ball back and forth to find opportunities. After a series of slow passes, they suddenly accelerated. Maradona ran to get rid of Zheng Qi's defense and received the ball, and then passed the ball out as soon as possible. The teammate who received the ball successfully broke through and scored. The Overlord team passed the ball to Zheng Qi as soon as the ball kicked off. Others began to run around and entangled. Zheng Qi broke through with the ball, constantly got rid of Maradona's interference, and kept moving forward. Finally, he successfully broke into the penalty area and scored a goal with a clean shot straight to the far corner of the goal. Whether it was Boca Juniors' overall attack or Zheng Qi's personal breakthrough, they all had excellent results. At the end of the first half, the score was an unexpectedly high score, especially after Zheng Qi once again made a wonderful breakthrough, forcibly got rid of Maradona and broke into the penalty area, and then faced Passarella's replacement, pretended to shoot again and broke through, and shot the ball into the dead corner of the goal. The score was locked at 6-6. The confrontation between individuals and the collective ended in a tie. Boca Youth's offense was particularly collective and team-oriented. The 6 goals came from 6 different players. Maradona, Batistuta, Messi, Zanetti, Riquelme and Brujabka each scored a goal, showing their characteristics of multi-point blossoming. And what about the Overlord? 6 goals, all scored by Zheng Qi. The boss has scored 17 goals now. What is he trying to do? Does he want to break Lucian's record in 3 games? Liga Rui said in surprise in the stands. The others were also staring at the field in a daze. In the first half of the game, Zheng Qi showed all kinds of ways to score goals, whether it was a powerful shot after breaking into the penalty area, a light lob, a long-distance spinning ball. He tried all kinds of offensive methods, and each time he attacked, he seized the best opportunity, and then used a shot straight into the dead corner, forcing Boca Juniors goalkeeper Bashir to save the ball in vain. If he continues like this, he can score 12 goals in this game and break his own record again. 23 goals in 2 games, and 8 goals in the final will break Lucian's record. Zheng Qi said. "You're really good at math." Niolawa sighed. Zheng Qi rolled his eyes. Is this called good math? Is this good elementary school math? The other team won't watch him score goals like this, right? What else? The teams that tried every means to stop the Overlord team's attack have already lost. It's really a headache. The main reason is that such a strong new team like them has never appeared before. Those strong teams can't think of a way to deal with them in a short time, and they don't have a deep understanding of the Overlord team. They have taken too big an advantage in this World Cup, so it's normal for them to win the championship. Yes, in fact, it can be seen from the fact that Bayern lost to them in the last game. The level they showed is too outstanding. The strength can be said to be one level higher than all opponents, and the opponents are unfamiliar with them. It is normal that no one can defeat them in a short time. In the past classical football professional competitions, such teams often appeared. Any opponent could not do anything to them in a short time. Only after accumulating more experience and many genius calculations and confrontations can we find some ways to deal with them. The boss's team is in such a situation. In that case, can't we cheer for them in advance? Don't be so optimistic. Before winning the championship, any cheering is actually meaningless. Amid the discussions of the extraordinary players, the players of both sides have entered the locker room to prepare for the second half of the game. In fact, in the World Cup, the first half of the game is actually for both sides to get familiar with the opponent. After all, the World Cup is held once a year. Even if they're regulars in the World Cup, there are many situations that are not familiar to their opponents. Even if they can observe their opponents by watching the game, everyone knows that just watching the opponent's game and playing a game with the opponent in person are really 2 different things. Therefore, many strong teams have a habit of testing and understanding each other when they meet in the first half, and then making targeted tactics in the second half. After all, in the absence of a league, the level and strength of a team are actually very few. Without understanding and familiarity in the first half, it is difficult to make a real evaluation. As for the Overlord team, they don't have such confusion. Anyway, no matter what opponent they face, they are all their own set, attack, and attack continuously. From this perspective, the Overlord team is indeed strong enough. After all, they can take themselves as the main force in every game and truly take the initiative into their own hands. To be able to do this is already amazing. Our strength has always been our overall strength. In terms of offense, we have the ability to suppress all opponents and control the rhythm of the game in our own hands. This is the source of our strength. In these two games, all the shots and goals were completed by me. This is not because we changed our tactics, but because the focus of the tactics has changed. If the opponent does not notice this, then they will definitely not be able to beat us. After returning to the locker room, Zheng Qi waved his fist. We will continue to attack in the second half. Although our opponents did not make any mistakes in the offensive in the first half, this situation will not last long. Remember, if they change their defensive tactics in the second half, then we will definitely win. Zheng Qi's words made the players of the Overlord team wave their fists one after another. They knew what Zheng Qi meant. If the opponent changed their defensive tactics, it meant that they began to unconsciously pay attention to defense. If they paid attention to defense, their attention to offense would be weakened. In this case, it would be the Overlord team's opportunity. The Overlord team always focused only on offense. If other teams were slightly distracted in this regard, then the Overlord team would be able to occupy an absolute advantage on the field. This is the key to their success. On offense, the Overlord team will never waver, but it is difficult for other teams to do this. Even if they're confident in their offense, they will inevitably waver, and the Overlord team's resolute attitude on offense will make the opponent lose confidence in their offense unconsciously, because no team can rely on their own offense like the Overlord team to get to where they are today. From this perspective, the composition of the Overlord team is also a unique advantage. Their best players are the two attackers. Under the leadership of these two attackers, they have achieved countless good results, so they will only continue to launch attacks under the leadership of these two attackers, and keep attacking, focusing all their attention on the offense. Such determination is also extraordinary, and almost no team has such offensive determination. But the Overlord team has it. If they cannot surpass the Overlord team in this regard, no team can defeat them. Unfortunately, no team in the World Cup knows this, so they will still be distracted and hesitate, but they don't know that it is because of such distraction and hesitation that they will not have any chance of winning. The Overlord team is not an invincible team, but in such a short time, their opponents really can't think of any way to defeat them. As long as they are not particularly unlucky, then this World Cup is destined to belong to them. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 792 Different Pressures. Boca Juniors was indeed a little hesitant. They were indeed an excellent team, with excellent overall performance and good experience. Although their two rookie talents and important players only emerged this year, the others were also experienced. Such a team would not have any problems with game experience, and even Maradona and Messi were not lacking in game experience, but in big competitions. In the game, their acumen was definitely not a problem. However, in the first half of the game, although the score was a draw, Zheng Qi's ruthless approach really made them feel that if they continued to give him such opportunities, he would continue to score goals without mercy. In fact, they did not expect Zheng Qi to be soft-hearted before. They had heard that the executioners were soft-hearted when beheading, but they had never heard of soldiers beheading the enemy on the battlefield, because the executioners beheaded the enemy, and the opponent had no ability to resist. Even the most cold-blooded people would inevitably have some compassion. On the battlefield, if you don't cut the enemy will cut you, so there is no room for any mercy. The same is true in football matches. If you give me a chance, I will certainly score the goal. If I waste a chance, I will be irresponsible to my team. In such a situation, how could anyone be soft-footed? What they are counting on is that under the defense of Maradona and others, Zheng Qi will encounter great difficulties in every attack. In such consumption, the possibility of mistakes will certainly increase. If Zheng Qi attacks alone, then if he has a problem, it will affect the effect of an attack, which is of course much easier than expecting the opponent to have a problem as a whole. The hope of scoring a goal is on oneself, and the others are stared at by the opponent. This is certainly a kind of honor, but also a huge pressure. Under such pressure, it is normal for a person to be crushed. However, Zheng Qi did not make any mistakes in the first half. He accurately grasped every opportunity, which made the Boca Juniors players who were originally very confident shaken. This man is as cold as a stone. Will he make mistakes? What if he doesn't make mistakes? Then what is the meaning of our game? Even the strongest person can't bear such inquiries. Even if he doesn't make mistakes, we won't make mistakes either, at least we won't lose. Maradona said in the locker room. The players of Boca Juniors all raised their heads and looked at Maradona. Remember our discussion before the game. The key is not whether they make mistakes in their offense, but whether we make mistakes in our offense. If we don't make mistakes in our offense, we can be invincible, or at least it's a draw, don't you think? Maradona continued. It's not possible to do this, even if it's the overlord team, it's just to insist on making mistakes later than the opponent. Messi said helplessly. What you said is a key, but if the overlord team can do it, can't we? Now is the time to persist, now is the time to compete for this. At such a critical moment, should we be afraid and give up this correct path to replace it with another unpredictable path? Maradona waved his fist and said. The players of Boca Juniors were stunned. Then Ron asked, how can we be sure that this path is the right one? At least now it seems that it is not wrong. If it is not the wrong path, we can keep going. Even if we lose, we will not regret it because we insisted on doing it. If we change to another path, we will definitely regret why we changed the path at the time. Because if we start from the beginning, there will definitely not be enough time, and we will definitely lose this game. We should know it by looking at the end of Bayern. Maradona said. The players of Boca Juniors were speechless again. This statement, they could not refute it. Try to attack. I will try my best to help you attack. You must also try your best to create the most reliable scoring opportunities. Only in this case can we win. The overlord team is the biggest surprise in this World Cup and the team most likely to win the World Cup. If we can beat them, then we will definitely win the World Cup. At this point, Maradona waved his fist and said word by word, this game is our final. I listened to you. Passarella, the oldest player, waved his fist. Everyone, in the second half, continue to concentrate on attacking and let the overlord team know that we are the team with the best offensive ability in the World Cup. Compared with us, any team that wants to compete with us in offense is just a foolish dream. The players of Boca Juniors waved their fists and shouted loudly. At this moment, their fighting spirit has been ignited. There is nothing to say. Since the most respected captain and the most talented Maradona have reached a consensus, what they have to do next is nothing more than to follow their arrangements. What about you, Leo? Maradona turned his head and looked at Messi. What's there to say? I'm ready to help you score any time. Messi shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile. In the second half, the opponent's defensor against me may be tighter, and their regional defensor is also very effective in dealing with our passing and coordination. Your breakthrough and scoring abilities should be better utilized. I will try my best to help you distract the opponent's defensor. Maradona said. You are the core of our offense, Messi said in surprise. Maradona shook his head. Now Yuan's Thong and I are entangled with each other. He can launch an attack alone, but I need to distract his attention. In this case, we also need to open up a second battlefield. Your performance will be crucial. Do you understand? Breakthrough when you have the opportunity, and use your breakthrough and shooting to help us score more goals. Got it. Messi nodded. I will let them know my level. Looking at these two young people, the other players of Boca Juniors began to feel much more at ease. We have two such outstanding young people, why can't we succeed? Even if we don't succeed, there will be a chance next time. In short, in this game, we should fully exert our offensive capabilities. Thinking in this way, the Boca Juniors players were obviously in a different state when they came on the court in the second half. They seem to be going all out. Zheng Qi whispered to Lucian. Well, their attitude is different. It seems that they discussed and reached a consensus during the halftime break, and they have corrected their attitudes. They want to fight us to the end, sir. Lucian also looked at it and nodded. What are you talking about? Why can't I see any difference? Wang asked curiously. Zheng Qi and Lucian looked at each other and laughed. You can't see it. Our angle of observation is different from yours. Their mental outlook has changed a lot compared to the end of the first half. Although it is very subtle, we can see it. Zheng Qi smiled. I still can't see it. Forget it. Whatever you say is what it is. Wang shook his head and decided not to think about it anymore. We will continue to attack in the second half, right? Yes, let's run and let me score. Be prepared. I may pass the ball to you at any time. When there is a chance, launch an attack and shoot in the penalty area. This way, the probability of scoring a goal will be much higher. Zheng Qi said. Understood. Ba Wang nodded. They didn't have any problem with this. After all, they had always played like this before. In the game, they should not be too close to Zheng Qi to distract the opponent's attention. If they are too close, they will interfere with Zheng Qi. They should not be too far away. If they are too far away, Zheng Qi will not be able to find that target to receive. At the same time, the defenders of Boca Juniors are following them closely in this game. They should also run actively and put themselves in an environment where they can receive the ball at any time. Zheng Qi will pass the ball to them at any time, and they should also be ready to receive Zheng Qi's pass at any time. This is the tactics of the Ba Wang team. This tactic does not have a general concept, but only specific operations each time. In the second half of the game, we kick off. We want to get ahead and take the initiative. Do you understand? Zheng Qi said in the team channel. The players of Overlord answered at the same time. The whistle for the second half of the game sounded. Lu Xiaoshan received the pass from Overlord and then passed it back to Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi took the ball and dribbled forward. As he moved forward, the players of Overlord also began to move forward at the same time, and they began to press forward as a whole. Not only the forwards, but also that two midfielders behind Zheng Qi and the two fullbacks on the wings began to move forward. They were absolutely sure of Zheng Qi's ability to control the ball and break through. Maradona came forward head-on, his steps were firm and his running was active. Even if he knew that he could hardly stop Zheng Qi from dribbling forward no matter how strong he was, he would still do it. Because every defenser and defenser will not be the same, every defenser will have new opportunities. Even if Boca Youth only cut off Zheng Qi's forward route, would Zheng Qi dare to break through alone? He must still need to pay attention to the running of others, whether it is the running of his teammates or the running of his opponents, he needs to pay attention. In this situation, he can break through and score a goal. Otherwise, if he dribbles forward foolishly, the opponent will concentrate their forces to double-team him. He can choose to pass the ball, but if he does not observe the movement of all the players when breaking through, how can he pass the ball correctly? Therefore, Maradona firmly believes that in such an attack, Zheng Qi must be under great pressure. Such pressure will accumulate and sooner or later cause him problems. Boca Juniors often relies more on the whole team. Everyone is under less pressure and will definitely be able to hold out longer than Zheng Qi. Chapter 793. The second battlefield. Zheng Qi is indeed constantly observing the running of his teammates and opponents. This is a necessary quality for an excellent midfield core. He is used to doing this. Although he usually observes while running, and now he observes while controlling the ball, for Zheng Qi, what he has always pursued is to be able to do this throughout the game. He knows that doing this will always put pressure on himself. Such pressure will not be able to overwhelm him at any time, but this is also his requirement for himself. He can do this perfectly throughout the game. Maradona does not believe that Zheng Qi can do it, but Zheng Qi believes that he can do it. This is probably the difference between the two. Maradona's entanglement also brought a lot of pressure to Zheng Qi. He is also a talented attacker. Of course, he knows countless ways of attacking. He can predict Zheng Qi's actions to a certain extent. Even if Zheng Qi is well prepared, his defender can always play a significant role. In Maradona's entanglement, Zheng Qi kept moving forward, while constantly observing the running positions of both sides. It seems that they haven't changed their tactics. Do they want to crush me? Impossible. After observing for a while, Zheng Qi didn't find anything wrong, so he started to speed up, preparing to force Maradona to leave behind. When he was about to speed up, Maradona decisively fouled. He almost used his hands and feet to push Zheng Qi down, and the system whistle sounded. Although Maradona was not given a yellow card, many fans and players knew that such an action would have a weight on Maradona's defender. If he continued to use such an action, he would most likely be given a card. Do you want to interrupt my offensive rhythm? Zheng Qi got up and asked Maradona with a smile. I have to try. Maradona replied. Zheng Qi nodded slightly. Maradona's neither humble nor arrogant approach really gave him a headache. If the opponent is brave, he can lure him into making mistakes. If the opponent is timid, he can intimidate him. However, it is not an easy task to deal with Maradona, who is calm and can analyze the situation and the level of the enemy and ourselves. However, no matter how difficult the opponent is, he has to deal with it well. If he can continue to score goals, no matter how stable Maradona's mentality is, there will be some ripples, right? In the final analysis, what is being compared now is that both sides will make mistakes earlier. No one can avoid making mistakes, but a good enough level and good enough preparation can make mistakes come later. Whoever makes mistakes later can take a huge advantage in this game. So whether it is Zheng Qi or Maradona, while trying not to make mistakes, they also want to try to lure the other side to make mistakes. The performance of the two of them will determine the direction of the next game. After passing the free kick, Zheng Qi quickly received the return pass, and then he continued to dribble that ball towards the middle. The players of the Overlord team began to run and help him open the channel. Zheng Qi was not polite and broke through all the way. Under Maradona's defensor, he still broke through to the front of the penalty area. Seeing that Passarella did not come up to defend himself in the first time, he decisively swung his right foot and was about to shoot directly at this position. Maradona struggled to bypass Zheng Qi's obstruction and flew to block Zheng Qi's shot. He didn't want to foul, but just wanted to block Zheng Qi's shot. The next moment, Zheng Qi lifted the ball over his body and jumped over Maradona. When he did this, Passarella moved. He rushed over quickly and was about to clear the ball before Zheng Qi controlled the ball. Taking the risk of breaking Zheng Qi's attack is also a very meaningful thing for defensa. Even if such a clearance does not allow them to gain control of the ball, it can also put more psychological pressure on Zheng Qi. After all, failing to score a goal in an attack is definitely different from being able to score a goal in every attack. However, just when Passarella was about to clear the ball successfully, Zheng Qi was still one step faster than him. Gently patting the ball downward, the ball quickly fell diagonally to the ground. Passarella kicked it in the air, and the ball that fell to the ground bounced diagonally upward. Zheng Qi, who followed up, raised his foot to control the ball, then accelerated and broke through, rushing past Passarella. The next thing was simple. After breaking through Passarella, Zheng Qi kicked the ball into the goal of Boca Juniors. 7-6, the Overlord team took the lead for the first time in this game. There were huge cheers and sighs from the stands. The cheers were of course from the Chinese fans, and the sighs were from the Argentine fans and neutral fans. They all felt that this scene was too familiar. In the last game, the Overlord team seemed to have taken the advantage in this way. This made them unconsciously think that when the Overlord team kept chasing, they might not have the hope of winning, but when they were ahead, they would definitely be able to win in the end. This kind of influence is amazingly large. After all, such an influence is certainly aimed at the fans, but the fans' reactions can also have an impact on the players on the field, even if it is only very small, but in the game, even a small impact may have serious consequences. The Overlord team still took the lead, which dealt a certain blow to Boca Juniors. Although they had analyzed it very thoroughly during the halftime break, in many cases, human thinking is still difficult to control. Don't be anxious, attack patiently, we need our wholehearted efforts in attacking. Maradona said in the team channel. The Boca Juniors attackers cooperated with each other very well, and he didn't need to remind them. However, at this time, Maradona had to use his voice to make everyone concentrate on the game. Pay attention when passing. When Messi has an open space, give him the ball and let him attack. Passarella also said in the team channel. Under the reminder of the two of them, Boca Juniors launched a counter-attack after the restart. You didn't take the ball. Without you participating in the attack, Boca Juniors' offensive ability will decline a lot. Zheng Qi followed Maradona and said with a smile. You're running so actively now. No matter how I change the rhythm, you may interfere with me. Of course, I have to take less of the ball. Maradona replied. In this way, we have an advantage. Zheng Qi laughed. That's not necessarily true. We are good at overall attack and combat. Your team's defensa will not have much impact on us, even if I don't participate in the attack. Messi replied calmly. Very confident. Then let the facts teach me a lesson. Zheng Qi said. Maradona did not answer again, but looked at Messi running in the front court. He and Zheng Qi were entangled. Messi, don't let me down, this is the time for you to stand up. Messi was running constantly. He and Maradona had known each other for a long time, and the cooperation between the two was quite tacit. After joining Boca Youth together, they quickly showed their level and quickly became the main force and core of Boca Youth. They also led Boca Youth to eliminate the old rival River Plate, which had entered the World Cup for 3 consecutive years. Such performance is top-notch. It is precisely because of such outstanding performance that Maradona was able to grab such a title. Although he grabbed the title of another top Argentine player, everyone knows that the best is still Maradona. He was also used to Maradona being the core, and he played around Maradona, but now, he was going to be the core. Maradona's confrontation and entanglement with Zheng Qi on both offensive and defensive consumed too much of his energy, and he no longer had the energy to lead Boca Youth's offensive. Now was the time for him to stand up. Messi certainly knew this truth. So wander the defensor of Lucian, who was returning to defensa. Messi also got a chance to get the ball through his own running. After receiving the pass from Ron, Messi got the ball. He originally got the ball while retreating to get the ball. However, while receiving the ball, Messi had already moved back a few steps quickly, and turned around smoothly before Lucian came up to interfere. When Lucian saw Messi turning around, he immediately went up to him. He was confident enough in his reaction and defensive confrontation ability. The two best people in Boca Youth were Maradona and Messi. Zheng Qi was guarding Maradona, so he naturally had to take up the task of guarding Messi. Seeing Lucian coming up, Messi raised his foot, made a fake pass, then dunked the ball back, and then accelerated to break through from the other side. Lucian reacted in time. In his opinion, Messi's fake move was very beautiful, but when he broke through, his speed seemed a little slow. However, when he was about to intercept, Messi's speed suddenly increased by 1 gear than before, and rushed past Lucian, who was caught off guard. Fuck. Lucian only had time to complain in his heart, and Messi had already rushed past him. When Lucian turned around, Messi had already broken through his defensor. Man-to-man defensor is a character pit, and zone defensor is actually not much different. After all, although it is a zone defensor, it cannot relax the defensor against all the opponent's offensive players. So when Lucian was broken through by Messi, a huge gap immediately appeared in the defense line of the Overlord team. Messi successfully broke into the penalty area, and when Marshu came to fill the position, he lightly pushed the far corner, equalizing the score for Boca Juniors again. Chapter 794. Blood on the Bayonet. Boss Chen, be careful when defending this guy, his rhythm changes frequently. Didn't I tell you just now? Hearing Yinbu say this to him, Lucian could only nod his head in frustration. I understand, I'll pay attention next time. What a shame, I despise you. Zheng Qi privately chatted with Lucian. You didn't even remember this, are you still a top professional player? Damn, I'm an attacker, it's normal that I didn't pay attention to this. Don't be so harsh. Then you have to pay attention next time. Messi's rhythm changes very naturally and quickly, and it's difficult for me to judge his running, so don't have too much pressure when defending, understand? Messi's breakthroughs may increase in the future, because besides Maradona, his breakthroughs are the most likely to score. Zheng Qi continued. You should also pay attention, their defense against you will become more and more tight, and your pressure will also increase, so take care of yourself. Lucian said unhappily. If he hadn't seen this, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to retrieve to guard Messi, the opponent's second in command. Wasn't it just to increase the pressure on Boca Juniors' offense and make mistakes first? In the end, he was humiliated by a young man and scolded by Zheng Qi. It was really not worth it. Looking at Lucian's depressed back, Zheng Qi couldn't help but laugh. Lucian's retrieved defensor is too important for the Overlord team. Although he is better at attacking, with his attributes and level, if he can concentrate on defensor, the Overlord team's defensor ability is estimated to rise to a higher level. After all, such a top attacker can also play a huge role when he concentrates on defensor. Marking Maradona himself has already added huge pressure to Boca Juniors' offensive, and when Lucian participates in marking Messi, it will also add huge pressure to Boca Juniors' offensive. Such pressure may not be noticeable when accumulated, but in fact, it will be quite considerable. After all, Boca Juniors' offensive is a whole attack, but the cooperation between them is still very important. If Zheng Qi and Lucian can cut their two most important attackers out of their overall offensive as much as possible, then the possibility of Boca Juniors making mistakes in the game will be much greater. You know, for a game, what both sides have to do is nothing more than increase their success rate and make the other side make more mistakes. Any approach is to promote these two seemingly general goals. In this case, the Overlord team puts pressure on the opponent when attacking and when defending. Zheng Qi and Lucian's retreat will not reduce their offensive power, but they just do some extra things. Using goals to put pressure is pressure, and using defense to put pressure is also a kind of pressure. The breakthrough is beautiful. Next time, pay attention to Chen Fengxiao's defense against you. His attributes are excellent. Maradona said to Messi. Well, but in defensa, the advantage of attributes will not appear too great. I will pay attention to it. Messi nodded. I will also run more and try to get a chance to meet you. In short, compared with them, our collective attack is the best. Maradona said in the team channel. The players of Boca Juniors responded in unison. After successfully equalizing the score, they are in a very good mood. You know, whether it is offensive or defensive, the players of Boca Juniors actually have to pay a lot. Don't think that the Overlord team relies on Zheng Qi to break through when attacking, but this does not mean that others just watch. They also have to run, mark, and get rid of, otherwise, the opponent is unguarded in a dangerous position, and Zheng Qi just needs to pass the ball, which is a huge threat. The Overlord team launched a counter-attack. Maradona met Zheng Qi, and the other players of Boca Juniors each set their sights on their own targets. Aren't you tired of following me like this? Zheng Qi asked Maradona while controlling the ball. I just focus on following you. I'm not tired at all. How about you? You have to avoid my interference and observe other people's running positions. It's not easy, right? Every attack depends on you to lead. One attack takes several minutes. This kind of overdraft is very large. Maradona began to fight back with words. Fortunately, I can still support it for only 90 minutes. Zheng Qi pushed the ball to the side, avoiding Maradona's outstretched foot, and then answered. After answering this sentence, he quickly pushed the ball forward and accelerated the breakthrough. Maradona followed closely. The speed of both sides was similar. Although Maradona was left behind by him by half a body, he still kept interfering with him from the side and back. Although he was a little weaker in strength, Maradona's interference would never be ignored by Zheng Qi. The two of them were entangled all the way, but Zheng Qi still scored a goal. After he broke through to the front of the penalty area, he raised his foot and passed the ball to Lucian, who was responding from the side, and then he sprinted directly into the penalty area without stopping. After Lucian stopped the ball, he immediately turned around and hung the ball into the penalty area. Zheng Qi followed up and jumped while running, and volleyed the ball into the air. Maradona wanted to interfere with Zheng Qi, but he couldn't interfere with Zheng Qi's shooting action behind him. If he used force, the opponent could easily make Zheng Qi fall when he volleyed, but doing so would definitely be a foul that gave the opponent a penalty kick. I had committed a foul between an ordinary foul and a yellow card before. If the action was big this time, and it was a foul with the last defender, I might be directly kicked out by the system with a red card, and there would be no hope of winning. So he could only watch Zheng Qi volley the ball out, praying in his heart that Boishir could save this hasty shot. However, his prayers were in vain. Although Boishir reacted immediately, his outstretched hand was still just a little short of touching the ball. Beautiful. A wonderful volley shot. A wonderful cooperation between the two. Chen Fengxiao's lob pass was too accurate, and Yuan Thong's forward run was perfect. In the face of such cooperation, what defender can stop it? Yuan Thong passed the ball, ran forward, and volleyed. This series of actions took less than a second. No matter how solid the defense is, it would be impossible for them to react to such cooperation, right? This is Yuan Thong's 19th goal in this World Cup. He is now 4th in the scorer list, second only to his teammate Chen Fengxiao, the German bomber and Brazil's Pelé. He only took less than 2 games. There is still half an hour left in the game. How many goals can he score? The commentators expressed their attitudes one after another. Now the Overlord team did not actually gain a real advantage or led. The score of 8-7 was not a very safe score. Next was the attack of Boca Juniors, and they could equalize the score at any time. However, psychologically, many people felt that the Overlords had begun to gain an advantage. This goal is wonderful, but we have scored more wonderful goals than this. Maradona said. Wait and see me and Leo make the score back. It's not enough to rely on you two alone. We will also participate. We are not at a disadvantage now. What we have to do now is to assist you and score one goal after another. Riquelme's words caused the Boca Juniors players to respond in unison. That's right, in the next game, we must put all our strength into the attack. No matter what, we must stick to it to the end. Batista patted Maradona on the shoulder. Don't think that our mentality will be easily shaken. We are very experienced. You don't have to emphasize it before every attack. Looking at Batista's smiling face, Maradona slowly smiled. I understand. I shouldn't underestimate our predecessors. Let's work together to equalize the score. Even if we fall behind, we must try to equalize the score every time. This way, we can at least get a draw and wait for the chance to win. Maradona waved his fist and said loudly. That's right, that's it, we have to seize every attack. No matter if we fall behind or not, as long as we score, we can equalize the score. There's nothing to worry about. Focus on attacking and win the game with attacking. Even if we can't win, it's a draw. At most, we can play overtime. What's there to be afraid of? If the overtime is tied again, it means penalty kicks. In terms of penalty kicks, we have a much greater advantage because we have a goalkeeper with extremely sensitive reactions. Passarella said in the team channel. It's difficult for me to save the opponent's shot because the distance and angle of his shot always make people feel headache, but if it's a penalty shootout, I won't be afraid of anyone. I will definitely save their penalty kicks. Goshir said in the team channel. Goalkeepers, backcourt players, midfield players, frontcourt players all came out to express their attitudes. Boca Juniors is now truly united as one, moving towards their goal of scoring goals. They are very motivated. Brothers, we can't lose our momentum either. We need to defend more actively and keep our positions. Don't leave any gaps inside or outside the penalty area. Now is the time to see who can hold on longer. Zheng Qi waved his fist and said loudly. The players of the Overlord team all nodded. At this time, in addition to playing, they also need to fight with will and momentum. They must not be timid at this time. If they are timid, it will be difficult to make up for the slightest problem or mistake. To use the description of a war, now is the time to draw blood. Chapter 795. Starting over again. Boca Juniors launched a fierce attack, while the Overlords began to run and intercept frantically, trying to block the opponent's attack. Boca Juniors' attack is usually through the back and forth passing of the midfield, coupled with the continuous assistance of the two wings, constantly looking for the gaps in the opponent's defense line, and then passing the ball out. Although their players' confrontation ability is not bad, they are still more accustomed to passing the ball to the front court rather than forcing a breakthrough. Maradona, who was retreating, got the ball under the interference of Zheng Qi, and then passed it to Riquelme who was advancing. Riquelme did not stop the ball, but directly sent a medium-long pass to Messi who ran out of space in the front court. When Messi got the ball, Lucian pressed up. Messi took small steps, first pretending to break through the middle, and then pushed the ball to the side and broke through forcibly. Lucian was fooled again. It's not his fault. People's reactions always have an upper limit. When defending, they rely more on experience and early judgment. Lucian's experience in the game, actually, it's average, because he is a professional player of the football era, not a professional player of classical football. So just now he just subconsciously blocked Messi's most threatening breakthrough, the middle, and ignored the fact that he could also break through on the side. After Messi broke through him, Lucian chased him closely, but he didn't have any advantage in speed. Messi, who had taken the lead, left him behind, and then pushed the ball towards the penalty area again, breaking through diagonally. Uziki came up from the side. They couldn't let Messi go forward. The defense line of the Overlord team was a regional defensor, and Messi was now attacking the area he was guarding. Messi didn't entangle with him, but directly raised his foot and passed the ball while running. He kept moving forward diagonally. After Batistuta got the ball, he took the opportunity to pass the ball into the penalty area. Messi inserted it like lightning, took the ball, and then resolutely kicked the ball at a place where the angle was not big. This was a shot flying to the far corner. The ball flew accurately past Zheng, then hit the inside of the far post and flew into the goal. Messi performed a hat-trick. After Maradona was entangled by the opponent, Messi stood up bravely. In the second half of the game, it was his continuous goals that allowed Boca Juniors to keep getting draws. Now the game has entered a stalemate. Who will have the last laugh? It is obvious that in the offensive, both sides will not easily give up their initiative. The commentator sighed and said that in the second half of the game, both sides showed strong nerves and good condition. After such a difficult confrontation in the first half, both sides were able to maintain such a good state. It can only be said that these guys are talented. Without a strong mentality, excellent level and rich experience, it is impossible to do this. In fact, both sides do not have particularly rich experience, especially their core players. Except for Chen Fengxiao, who is relatively old, Yuan Thong, Maradona or Messi are not very old. Maradona and Messi are less than 20 years old. Yuan Thong is a little older, but only 22 or 23 years old. Such an age can only be regarded as a newcomer in the World Cup. However, such a newcomer has begun to lead the top 4 teams towards victory. In front of them, those older and more experienced players are just their assistants and points. They are the commanders on the field. However, in the classical football game, this is a very normal thing, or it is the same in any competitive game. The ambition is not high in age, and the capable are in the position. It is such a simple truth. It's just that the young players can still perform so well in such a big scene, which really proves that they are all top players. At their age, maybe they will dominate the World Cup for a long time. Regarding this point, the commentators all hold a mentality of experiencing history, and their attention and commentary on this game are even more enthusiastic. The Overlord team launched a counter-attack. When defending just now, Boca Youth once again talked through the defense line, but they also persisted for a long time. Boca Youth found such a good opportunity to score a goal through continuous passing and back passing. Defending to this point is actually not a failed defensa, because at least it makes the opponent bear a lot of pressure when attacking. In the current classic football game, the purpose of defense lies in this. Boca Youth also understands this truth, so their next defensa still did not relax. Maradona still followed Zheng Qi closely, and the others kept running, constantly interfering with Zheng Qi's breakthrough route. When Zheng Qi breaks through, he always observes everyone's running, because Boca Juniors' defense line is not stupidly standing in a certain area, but constantly moving and running. While running, they can always vaguely interfere with Zheng Qi's breakthrough route. If there is no optimal route to break through, even Zheng Qi will not be able to grasp it. Therefore, every attack of the Overlord team is actually very careful. Zheng Qi does not break through in one breath when controlling the ball, but constantly passes the ball around the perimeter, finds a good opportunity, and then starts to break through. He controls the ball a lot, but he will not always control the ball under his feet, and occasionally he will pass the ball out. The speed of the game is very fast for both sides, but in terms of the rhythm of offensa and defensa, it is not fast. Neither side gives the other side any opportunity for a fast break, but instead attacks back and forth in a rigid manner, and can grasp the offensive opportunities every time. It is indeed difficult to do this, and they have completed this game very well until now, and no opportunity has slipped through their hands. After running back and forth, Zheng Qi once again shook Maradona off a little, and then received a pass from his teammate. This is why others dare not underestimate other players of the Overlord team. Apart from anything else, it is a great thing that Zheng Qi can get the ball in time every time, which proves the tacit cooperation between them and Zheng Qi. With such cooperation, if the opponent dares to leave someone among them empty, Zheng Qi will definitely give the ball to him immediately, and then quickly launch an attack and score the ball into the opponent's goal from the gap exposed by the opponent. The players of the Overlord team have shown this many times in previous games, so even if they didn't actually get such an opportunity in these two games, everyone believes that they have such ability. Seeing Zheng Qi get the ball again, Maradona rushed over. He was at a disadvantage in terms of attributes, but in Maradona's view, he must interfere, otherwise, Zheng Qi would be too relaxed. Even if there is no effect, he must continue to create pressure on him. When Maradona pounced, the players of the Overlord team began to run around gradually to help Zheng Qi clear the field. The road they left was often the road for Zheng Qi to break through. Even a fool could see this, but what could they do? Others could not give up their own marking targets to block Zheng Qi on that road. However, they did have a new idea, that is, to block Zheng Qi when he broke through to the front of the penalty area. Although it would be slower, there would still be some chances, right? Even when they did this before, Zheng Qi was still able to break through in advance and score the ball into their goal when they hurried over to fill the position. However, this time, it was a little different. When Zheng Qi just broke through the midfield, Batistuta rushed over from the side, trying to interfere with Zheng Qi's progress. Maradona was just a little behind Zheng Qi at this time. As long as he interfered a little, he could quickly stick to Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi did not pass the ball, but flicked the ball to the side, dodged Batistuta's pressing, and then continued to move forward, but the angle was just a little bit crooked. With enough space, Zheng Qi was not afraid of this level of pressing. "Keep going," Maradona said as he chased closely behind him. Although Batistuta's interference just now seemed to have no effect, it still slightly delayed Zheng Qi's forward momentum. Although it was almost invisible, Maradona could feel that the distance between him and Zheng Qi was shortened a little bit. Even if it was just a little bit, it was worth pursuing. Isn't the victory of the game often accumulated by relying on such a little bit? While Maradona was chasing, Ron also came over from the side. Not only Ron, Zheng Qi glanced at the corner of his eyes and found that Brajabka on the other side also came over. The midfielders of Boca Juniors stood relatively close to the middle and were able to come over in time to block. "I'm not playing with you anymore," Zheng Qi muttered in his heart, and then passed the ball. Maradona was chasing closely behind him, and the two midfielders of the opponent came to defend. Why didn't he pass the ball and wait? Seeing Zheng Qi pass the ball, Ron and Brajabka immediately turned and ran to other positions to fill in the gaps. Boca Juniors' defense had indeed left a gap, but they still had time to retreat and fill in the gaps. However, the Overlord team did not launch an attack. Zheng Qi chose to retreat after passing the ball, and Yingbu, who had the ball, immediately passed it back. After controlling the ball under his feet, Zheng Qi raised his hand. "Don't worry, we'll take our time in attacking," Zheng Qi said to all the Overlord team players. Maradona looked at Zheng Qi helplessly. The series of pressing just now only wasted some time, allowing the opponent's attack to start all over again. Although it cannot be said that there was no effect, Zheng Qi undoubtedly took a break and buffered it by doing this. It would be a bit difficult to make him make mistakes under the continuous pressure. Chapter 796. The individual is better than the collective. Zheng Qi's meaning was very clear. Boca Juniors' defense just now could be said to be good. While interfering with Zheng Qi, it also prevented the other offensive players of the Overlord team from getting many opportunities. It can be said that they made the greatest effort, and all the links were close to perfection. But what happened in the end? Zheng Qi passed the ball, retreated, took the ball, and prepared to reorganize the attack. This made their excellent performance and efforts just now come to nothing. The opponent just reorganized an attack. The score was a draw, and they could be more patient. Thinking of this, Maradona's heart twitched a little. There was one thing he had thought of a long time ago, but he didn't say it out of consideration for the emotions of others. Indeed, in theory, as long as Boca Juniors did not give up the attack and every attack was not problematic, then at least they could get a draw. But this does not take into account the time factor. What about time? The second half is only 45 minutes, and there are still more than 20 minutes. The Overlord team is getting more and more cautious in attacking, and it takes more and more time. If they use up almost all the time and then take the lead, will Boca Juniors still have a chance to equalize the score? But now the Overlord team has obviously begun to save time for attacking. They are constantly pursuing safety and wasting time. Sooner or later, the other Boca Juniors players will notice this. And as long as one person is emotionally affected, the others will be affected as well. Boca Juniors, who rely on overall attack, are more likely to make mistakes in such a situation. What about the Overlord team? Most of their hopes for attacking are indeed on Zheng Qi, but in such a situation, Zheng Qi alone is less likely to make mistakes. His overdraft may be relatively large, but as long as he can hold on, the Overlord team's attack will not have any problems. The confrontation between the individual and the collective. At this time, it is the individual who takes advantage. There is no doubt that this is a very ironic thing, but Maradona thought about it again and again, but found that he seemed to have no way to deal with it, because Zheng Qi's ability to control the ball is indeed too strong. Unless he makes a mistake on his own initiative, otherwise, whether it is forced or interfered, it is difficult for him to make a mistake. Facing such a guy, there is really no way. Maradona thought so, and when he defended next, his momentum seemed much worse. Although he was still stubbornly interfering with Zheng Qi's progress, the effect seemed much worse. Dribbling, spiking, emergency stop, dribbling horizontally, accelerating breakthrough. Zheng Qi used his ball control skills to the fullest. He continued to dribble that ball under Maradona's interference. After approaching the 30-meter offensive area, he saw that there were Boca Juniors defenders who wanted to interfere with him. Zheng Qi raised his foot and passed the ball. Lucian took the ball after retreating. After making a fake move to pass the ball back to Zheng Qi's feet, he chose to force a turn and break through. He has indeed been silent for too long, so long that Brown has been following him, but subconsciously ignored the possibility of Lucian turning around and breaking through. In the previous game, Lucian had not shot for a long time, and he had not even broken through a few times. Most of his time was involved in making balls, so even though the opponent would never ignore his threat, he still seemed more and more low-key. At this time, he began to show his top level. A top shooter can create threats at any time. Lucian is undoubtedly a top shooter. Brown wanted to stop him from turning, but was directly suppressed by Lucian with his strength. After forcibly breaking through him, Lucian took advantage of the situation and sent the ball into the penalty area, accelerating his sprint. Brown was the defender defending Lucian. After being broken through, only Passarella, who was in the replacement position, could come to stop Lucian. Passarella also responded immediately, running sideways to defend Lucian, trying to force his forward route and interfere with his ball possession. When he ran over, Maradona wanted to remind him, but found that he couldn't say it, remind Zheng Qi that he had already rushed through the middle. But he couldn't help but defend Lucian. If he didn't go to make up for the position, Lucian would face the goalkeeper directly. Sure enough, the next moment, Lucian passed the ball horizontally. Although Maradona was still interfering with Zheng Qi behind him, he couldn't make Zheng Qi waver. After the ball rolled over, Zheng Qi, while bearing the interference of Maradona behind him, kicked the ball into the goal of Boca Juniors. The Overlord team took the lead again, and Lucian scored the 9th goal of the game. "Are you panicking? I only have 10 goals left," Zheng Qi said to Lucian while running back. "You want to be the top scorer? No problem. As long as you can score, I will help you score. Anyway, I'm the first player to raise the goal record to 30, ha 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 ha." Lucian laughed. "If you have the ability, score 40. You're ruthless, but I can't score 40. Zheng Qi laughed dumbly. 30 is still possible, but 40 is really too difficult. The lead of the Overlord team has undoubtedly dealt a heavy blow to Boca Juniors. The lethality of the two opponents is too great. As long as they attack, it is almost impossible to lose the chance to score. How can they play like this? As for their own offense, they certainly have enough confidence, but look at the remaining time of the game, that's less than 20 minutes. To be precise, there are only a little more than 17 minutes left before the game is over. Time, one of the most critical factors in this game, began to really appear in front of them. The Overlord team's attacking performance, which is so easy, puts them under great pressure, because they can only win with great difficulty every time they attack. In this case, how can they have the confidence to persist until they make mistakes later than the opponent? What if the opponent does not make mistakes? Well, even if we don't make mistakes, every time we attack so hard to score, they seem to score easily. What if they take the lead again and only leave us 1 minute? At the time, can we really equalize the score? Many things cannot be thought about carefully. Once you think too much, you will worry about gains and losses, and the change of mood will affect the performance of the players. Although the players of Boca Juniors are experienced, they are not professional players after all. The difference between them in self-control ability and facing unfavorable situations is soon reflected. Tough guys like Passarella, Brashaga, Zanetti, and Sering did not have much impact on their performance, but for example, Riquelme and Fran's performance was a big ups and downs. As attackers, their mentality was originally a bit jumpy. It was fine before, but now it has begun to become a problem. In this case, the defense of the Overlord team began to appear very powerful. Boca Juniors kept passing and looking for opportunities, but was constantly disturbed by the pressing and running of the Overlord team. They blocked the position very well, so that Boca Juniors could only attack from some not very good angles when they launched the attack. Before, because of their excellent state and tacit cooperation, coupled with Messi's breakthrough, they were able to score goals in every attack. Now, after being affected, it seems much more difficult for them to score goals in their offense. If two people in the middle fail to connect, the impact will be great. Once the position and timing of the player who receives the ball are not good enough, he will also be affected. This is what chain reaction means. There is no room for any problems in the middle. Now it seems that your offense will have problems first. Zheng Qi, who was still following Maradona, laughed. Collective power must definitely beat individual power. Maradona's face had changed a little, but he still insisted. That's right, but it also depends on the timing and specific situation. Now I can control not to make mistakes, but what about you? Can you control your teammates not to make mistakes? Even if you have this ability, it will be difficult after I get entangled with you, right? Zheng Qi continued. Maradona did not answer, he didn't know how to answer. Because in the current situation, Zheng Qi's words are correct, very correct. His interference can reduce the number of times Maradona takes the ball. Once the number is reduced, it will be difficult for Maradona to sort out the team's offense by taking the ball himself. It doesn't matter at ordinary times, but now the players of Boca Juniors have been greatly affected. Without his participation, the possibility of mistakes is really great. Maradona decided to take a risk. He began to run hard, constantly avoiding Zheng Qi's defense, and then tried to catch the ball so that this attack could be successful. With a goal, the team can be more stable and can continue to persevere. Although there is no hope of victory, as long as you can persevere, you can always wait for opportunities. Aren't many seemingly impossible tasks finally successful in such persistence? There are many such examples, however, in all impossible situations, the proportion of such examples that can be completed is still very small. Maradona's efforts failed. When he was about to receive the pass from his teammate, he seemed a little impatient and failed to observe the surrounding situation calmly. The teammate who passed the ball to him also seemed a little hasty because of the opponent's pressure. So when he was about to receive the ball, he found that Zheng Qi came after him and intercepted the ball before he could get it. Maradona wanted to counter-op the ball at the time, but Zheng Qi took the ball and quickly took 2 steps back and dodged a safe distance. Not going back to defend. Then I have to break through quickly and score a goal, Zheng Qi said to Maradona with a smile. Maradona could only suppress his desire to hit someone, and then commanded the whole team to retreat. At this moment, he knew that Zheng Qi's personal strength now completely overwhelmed the Boca Juniors as a group. Chapter 797. The individual based on the whole. When Zheng Qi once again played a wonderful match with Liu Xiaoshen, and then fell to the ground and shoveled Liu Xiaoshen's pass into the goal in the small penalty area, everyone knew that in this game of scoring rate, the Overlord team was the last laugh. This was his 10th goal in this game, and it was also that goal that made the Overlord team lead the opponent by 2 goals. Before, when they were only leading by 1 goal, it was not considered a real lead, but now that the Overlord team is leading by 2 goals, it has broken the balance on the field. This is a very simple calculation problem. Although football matches cannot be calculated in this way, in this World Cup, the Overlord team played their best to the best extent and turned all the games into such calculation problems. This is very powerful, or in other words, no team has ever been able to play that game like this before. If all the games are like this, then the classic football game should undoubtedly die out, because it is too monotonous. A commentator couldn't help but say this, and his words resonated with countless people. Yes, football games should be diverse, but now it has become like this. What is the meaning of football games? However, at this moment, Zheng Qi on the field did not have such self-awareness. He felt that his game was also very hard, and although he continued to rely on his personal ability to launch attacks, if the opponent focused on defense, it was not without a chance to stop the attack of the Overlord team. After all, the level of other players in the Overlord team was indeed a little worse. Moreover, the opponent could not stop the attack of him and Liu Xiaoshen, and they did lack experience in dealing with opponents with super high attributes like them. From a technical point of view, Zheng Qi and Liu Xiaoshen had no advantage over the top players of these strong teams, and were even worse. It was just that the attribute points exceeded 100 points, which was a little too big. But Zheng Qi and Liu Xiaoshen had such a big advantage, and it would be too much for them not to use it, right? No matter what others think, at this moment, Zheng Qi and the Overlord team have already gained enough advantages. And the vacillation of Boca Youth was also completely revealed at this moment. Can we still win? There is no chance, right? The opponent was leading by 2 goals, and there were only a little over 10 minutes left before the end of the game. In this situation, it was really difficult to hope that they could persevere to the end. Maradona ran to kick off without saying a word. At this time, he showed his talent, fighting spirit and courage. After cooperating with his teammates continuously, he began to break through on his own. Although it was difficult for him to achieve results under Zheng Qi's defense, he still attracted Zheng Qi's attention and passed the ball to Messi. Messi also broke through by force and passed the ball to Maradona, who ran out of the gap. Maradona dribbled into the penalty area and scored a wonderful lot for Boca Juniors despite Zheng Qi's interference. 9-10, 1 goal left. Although there were only 5 minutes left before the end of the game, Maradona's performance proved that he was not desperate yet, and Boca Juniors was not sure to lose. Such a mentality is often very important. Under his leadership, the players of Boca Juniors regained their fighting spirit. Although their chances were slim, what if they could stop the Overlord's attack? What if they could seize the last chance to counter-attack? Then the game would go into overtime. At the time, it would be the Overlords who would have psychological problems, right? The role of the core often lies in this. A wonderful performance at a critical moment, plus a beautiful goal, is enough to turn the whole situation around, or at least turn around the mentality of teammates at the moment. This is too important. After all, only with this can they have the possibility of winning. They have hope again. These strong teams are really good, Zheng Qi said to Liu Xiaoshen in the team channel. Yes, it's really good, but we won't lose to them either. Liu Xiaoshen laughed. Score another one, see if you have a chance to score or I have a chance to score, Zheng Qi said to Liu Xiaoshen. What's the matter? I'm still 9 goals ahead of you. Liu Xiaoshen expressed disdain. The Overlords launched an attack again. There were still 5 minutes left before the end of the game. In theory, they didn't need to rush. They just needed to advance slowly. Even if they didn't score, as long as they could get through the remaining 5 minutes safely, there would be no problem. We can't think like that. We should attack as we should. Do you understand? Zheng Qi said to everyone in the team channel before launching the attack. The players of the Overlord team nodded one after another. They knew this truth. In fact, the most taboo thing in a football game is to keep calculating. Calculating, and finally distracting yourself from the game. Especially for the players on the field, the degree to which they can concentrate their attention determines the level of their performance on the field. The level of the Overlord team is not high. They are only at the level of the top 32 inches the Chinese region. In other words, if the Chinese region organizes a professional competition, then they may not reach the level of the top team players, but the level of the secondary league team. In classical football, although the current level of Chinese football is also world class, it is still a relatively weak country. The players of the Overlord team are nothing in the World Cup. But their performance on the field has always been excellent, not inferior to any strong team players, because they are very focused. In the game, they can always fully display their level. Around Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan, doing some relatively simple work, this is equally important. Zheng Qi's reminder may be a bit redundant, but it is his reminder that makes the players of the Overlord team refocus their attention. Yes, don't think too much, these things are what Zheng Qi and others should consider, just do your own duty, that's it. This kind of thinking is not collective, it seems very individual, but in fact it is also a kind of collectivism, and it can even be said to be the most efficient one. The other players of the Overlord team are just screws on the machine, not the leaders, but this is the most efficient way. Others interspersed and ran. Zheng Qi dribbled the ball and broke through, looking for opportunities. Maradona followed him closely, and even Messi retreated, and the two of them followed Zheng Qi together. Their speed and reaction are quite fast, so even if the defensive skills are a little worse, they can play a very good role. At least under the double attack of the two, it is much more difficult for Zheng Qi to break through. Zheng Qi's ball control skills began to be fully utilized, but he still couldn't avoid the opponent's two people's pressing. So after another unsuccessful breakthrough, Zheng Qi made an emergency stop and then passed the ball. "Do you still need two people to keep an eye on me?" Zheng Qi asked curiously after passing the ball. "Of course." Maradona gritted his teeth and said. At this time, Zheng Qi can no longer be allowed to attack. Even if he is a little empty in other positions, he must keep an eye on Zheng Qi to see if other players of the Overlord team have the ability to score. In addition to Zheng Qi, Lu Xiaoshan is also in the defensa, although only Brown is responsible for dealing with him. Yingbu, who received the ball from Zheng Qi, wanted to pass the ball back again, but he soon found that Zheng Qi was under the opponent's close defensa. It is not impossible to pass the ball, but if he passes it by force, it will be easily cut off. "Just attack, don't worry about me," Zheng Qi said in the team channel. Yingbu was stunned for a moment, and then chose to dribble forward by himself for the time being. No one came up to defend him, and it was still not affected by his dribble. After he took a few steps forward, Rom came up to him. While Yingbu was moving forward, he was observing the running positions of other teammates. He soon found that Zheng Qi, who was retreating, was temporarily unguarded. He immediately raised his foot and passed the ball to him. When Zheng Qi was about to receive the ball, Brukage had already run towards him. Zheng Qi did not stop the ball, but quickly passed the ball to the side. Yuziki, who was unguarded, took the ball, but he did not immediately pass the ball into the penalty area, although he was unguarded now and was very suitable for sending a beautiful cross. Yuziki took the ball diagonally and began to force a breakthrough into the penalty area. Anyway, there was no unguarding, so he would break through first. Of course, when he broke through, he was also observing his teammates running. This was also a habitual action for the Overlord team players to break through, because they might pass the ball at any time. Sure enough, the next moment, Zanetti rushed towards him. Yuziki was about to cut into the penalty area diagonally. If he didn't come up to defend, wouldn't he just watch him enter the penalty area? When Yuziki broke through, Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan began to move into the penalty area. Their running immediately attracted the attention of the opponents. Yuziki did not pass the ball to them, but made an emergency stop and then passed the ball to the other side of the penalty area. Zheng Qi, who was cutting forward diagonally, was unguarded and received the pass from Yuziki. Nice pass. How did Yuziki see Zheng Qi cutting forward behind him? The commentator shouted in surprise. The Overlord team players were not surprised at all, because Zheng Qi had been reminding Yuziki in the team channel. After receiving the ball, although Zheng Qi's shooting angle was not large, he was already close to the small penalty area. Passarella began to come over to fill in the position, and Guashie also moved his position to block the front point. Zheng Qi passed the ball without a doubt. With Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan involved, the defensive attention of the Boca Juniors retreating defenders was on the two of them. The Overlord rushed over from the middle, facing the rolling ball, and shot it directly. The ball quickly flew into the goal of Boca Juniors. See? My individual performance is based on the overall performance. Zheng Qi smiled and said to Maradona, who had no choice but to stop. Chapter 798. Eye-catching competition. With the goal scored by the Overlord team gained a key lead. Time was running out. Boca Juniors tried their best but couldn't score in front of the Overlord team's defensa. The final score was 11-9. The Overlord team scored double-digit goals again. In the 6 games before entering the top 32, they scored double-digit goals in 5 games. Only against Italy, who focused on defensa, did they fail to score double-digit goals, but the 8 goals in that game were enough to surprise people. Before, everyone might still look at this team with an interesting mentality, watching them score crazy goals in the game. However, at this time, all the fans who pay attention to the classic football World Cup realize how terrible this team is. 2 super players plus a group of teammates who closely attack around them, they are invincible in the World Cup. There are no weak teams among the opponents they have encountered along the way. Those opponents have tried every possible way to deal with them, whether it is attacking or strengthening defensa, targeted defensa or regional defensa. It can be said that they have used all methods, but still have no suitable way to deal with them. Judging from the score, the Overlord team has never achieved a big advantage, especially when facing those strong teams. It can be said that it has been walking on thin ice all the way. However, other people who watched the game knew that the level of such a team is quite outstanding. They can be said to have always taken the lead in the game, and then firmly grasped that little advantage and persisted until the end of the game. It is not easy to do this. You must know that in the game, the so-called advantage of the Overlord team is not big, or it is only a little bit, but they can still rely on their outstanding performance to grasp this advantage, and then use their strong control ability to maintain this advantage until the end. In this game that just ended, everyone can see, what advantage does the Overlord team have? What advantage do they have? In fact, there is no advantage. If there is really an advantage, it is that they took the lead in the second half. The advantage of kicking off in the second half, but they just grasped it, constantly took the lead, and used the advantage of kicking off in the second half to the limit, and finally made the players of Boca Juniors have emotional problems and won the game in one go. There must be a way to deal with your tactics. Maradona said unwillingly when shaking hands after the game. If there are players who can keep an eye on us, then they can easily deal with us. Zheng Qi replied with a smile. Maradona nodded. This is easy to think of, but it is difficult to do. Zheng Qi and Lucian not only have great advantages in attributes, but also those top defenders are still unfamiliar with them. This is the disadvantage of the cup competition. If it is in a top league, after those opponents gradually become familiar with Zheng Qi and Lucian, it is difficult for them to play out their advantages in attributes. In the final analysis, classical football is still relatively amateur. In an amateur environment, it is easier for Zheng Qi and Lucian to get space. Of course, if we are really marked, we will think of other ways to attack. Don't forget what I said, we are also a very good team, qualified to continue to win through our own performance. We are also very strong as a whole, which is the key factor for our individual performance. Zheng Qi smiled. Maradona continued to nod. He had nothing to say now. It was a pity to miss the opportunity to win to the finals, but for them, this game was obviously able to bring them enough valuable experience. This is also very important. Although few people will notice this, in fact, after accumulating enough experience, top players can often improve faster. The level of a player is often improved through victory, failure and other factors. The so-called failure today will become a huge fortune tomorrow. This is not just a casual remark or chicken soup. As long as the players can find out where they lost and what position they did not do well enough, and then improve it, they will definitely make great progress. Such progress is difficult to obtain in ordinary competitions. Only by gaining real experience and lessons in top-level confrontations can we really make progress. There is only one game left, whether it is the Chicago Bulls or Santos, we must work hard to kill them. Zheng Qi waved his fist and said to the players of the Overlord team. No problem. The players of the Overlord team waved their fists one after another. This game was very hard, but they were the winners in the end. Now, there is only one game left to reach the peak. Chinese clubs haven't won the World Cup for several years. If they win the World Cup as a new team, it will definitely become an unprecedented legend in the history of the World Cup. Although there are many examples of winning the championship in the first World Cup, there are definitely not many. This has never happened in the history of Chinese classical football. Although there are many teams that have won the World Cup before, they usually accumulate some experience in the Chinese region and the World Cup, and then have a good performance in the second year or even the third and fourth years, and then win the championship. There is no exception. Even teams such as Dongguan, Shunan, Kaohsiung, they did not win the championship in their first participation in the World Cup. They all accumulated experience, or there were some veterans with World Cup experience in the team, so that they could get more opportunities in the game and make a better breakthrough in the World Cup. There are many teams in the world that won the World Cup in their first participation, but there is no such team in China. If the Overlord team can win the championship, then there is no doubt that they will fill a gap in the history of Chinese football. This is also a great thing. I don't know who the opponent of the Overlord team will be in the final. It seems that we have to pay close attention to the next semi-final. Many Chinese fans are thinking so. Therefore, driven by this idea, the match between the Chicago Bulls and Santos actually attracted more fans, even though the number of neutral fans seemed a bit too much, but it was still a great thing. After all, in the popularity survey before the game, the match between the Bulls and Boca Juniors far exceeded the match between the Chicago Bulls and Santos, although the latter two teams are more famous than the former two teams. So after the game started, both the Chicago Bulls players and the Santos players were a little helpless. Because there were too many neutral fans in the stands, they didn't seem to be very involved in watching the game, which also affected the atmosphere in the stands. Although both sides had a large number of fans, and the number of American fans was quite large, because more than half of the neutral fans watched the game with indifferent expressions, it really affected everyone's mood. However, the mood may affect them. The players of Chicago Bulls and Santos are experienced and battle-hardened players. In the past 4 years, Bayern won 2 World Cup titles, and the remaining 2 titles were won by these two teams. They certainly have no lack of experience. Compared with the previous championship, Chicago Bulls has basically not changed. It is still the same 11 players, but their average age was not big at the time, so the whole team has not reached the point of aging. Santos has some personnel changes. The emergence of top newcomers who have won the title of Pele has made Santos' hope of winning this championship begin to grow. They are a top team with many good players and a reasonable age structure. It is time to show results. In this World Cup, they are the biggest favorites to win the championship, just like Bayern. Even before the game started, many media and comments believed that they would meet Bayern in the final. Should we pay special attention to Santos? What if they are defeated by Chicago Bulls? Wang asked Zheng Qi. That's fine. The Chicago Bulls lineup has been stable for 2 years, so it's much easier to observe them. Santos has an extra Pele this year, so of course we have to observe them carefully. Zheng Qi replied. Well, it's a traditional April 4, 2002 diamond midfield. It's rare to see such a formation. Lu Xiaoshan muttered. It's normal, the diamond midfield means they have enough confidence in themselves. Everyone has different tasks, but they don't have to stick to their positions on the field. Only top teams have such confidence. Zheng Qi said, aren't we the same? If we really look at the composition, our current formation should be February 4, 2004. I'm also a forward. Lu Xiaoshan nodded. This is indeed the truth. Although Santos' current lineup looks neat and tidy, in fact, during the game, their players have a very large range of running. The 2 fullbacks Albert and Carlos are almost wingers, and even the central defenders Lasso and Silva can often dribble past 1 or 2 people. This team's attack was even crazier than Boca Juniors. Although they seemed to score fewer goals than Boca Juniors, it was obvious that this team did not use all their strength in the previous games, but instead sprinted forward with ease. In the last quarter-finals, they really used all their strength. Such a team was of course more worthy of attention, and now is the best time to observe their strength. Of course, they had already observed the strength of the Overlord team in the stands before. Si estás escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significa lo descarga en y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 799. Farewell with a championship. This eye-catching semi-final, like the game of the Overlord team, did show at very high level. Sanchez is a crazy offensive team. From Albert, Carlos, Lasso, Silva on the back line, to Dunga, Rivaldo, Garrincha, Ronaldinho in the midfield, to Pele and Ronaldo on the front line, each of them is a good attacker. They cooperate with each other tacitly and have excellent personal abilities. Sometimes they choose to attack individually, and sometimes they cooperate as a whole, making it quite difficult for the opponent to defend. In the semi-finals, they faced Manchester United from England, which was also a very balanced and strong team. However, in the stalemate, they relied on a genius burst of inspiration to score a key leading goal, and finally eliminated this strong team and entered the semi-finals. Compared with Manchester United, the Chicago Bulls have similar characteristics. They are all teams that pay attention to overall offensive and defensive. Their team is very balanced and difficult to be defeated, but relatively speaking, they lack some explosive power. And Santos seized this point and won the final victory of the game. The two sides continued to attack. Santos' offense was much better, but they suffered a lot of losses in defense. However, every time they fell behind, they would rely on strong offense to turn the disadvantage back little by little, and they held the Chicago Bulls tightly. After a period of entanglement in the second half, they once again completed a beautiful outbreak and counterattack. After continuous counterattacks and scoring, they turned the situation of falling behind by 1 goal into a 2-goal lead in one breath. After gaining enough lead, they did not remain conservative, but continued to attack the opponent firmly. In the end, they relied on goals to eliminate the opponent with a score of 8-6 and entered the finals. Compared with the Overlord team's double-digit goals, Santos' offensive ability does not seem so terrible, but still shows a top level. Playing against such a team should be very enjoyable. Zheng Qi said thoughtfully in the stands. Why do you say that? The players of the Overlord team turned their heads and looked at Zheng Qi. Their situation is actually similar to ours. They are very strong in offense and average in defense. To deal with such a team, you don't have to think too much, just explode each other. Zheng Qi said. What's the difference between that and the last game against Boca? Lu Xiaoshan said disdainfully. Of course there is a difference. Pelé is a pure offensive player, while Maradona is more comprehensive. Zheng Qi replied. Is there any problem with that? Lu Xiaoshan was stunned. From the performance point of view, of course there is no problem, but Maradona is more comprehensive, he thinks more during the game, so he chose to man-to-man me, forcing us to attack only through me, but he didn't expect that this actually affected his offensive ability. Although he knew that he couldn't let his offense be affected by distracting himself on defense, he still made such a mistake unconsciously, thinking that he was relying on the overall strength to attack and defend. It's really lamentable. Zheng Qi said. Is that so? No wonder I don't think he seems to show a particularly strong level in offense. Lu Xiaoshan was stunned for a moment, then nodded. He knew that he couldn't let his attention be distracted by defense, but he was still distracted unconsciously. He thought his teammates were better than ours, but he had a little misunderstanding about the difference between individuals and the whole. This was the key to their failure. Zheng Qi laughed and said, he thought he was playing at the level of the whole team. In fact, he still put his performance above the whole team. As for me, it seems that I have been attacking alone, but I can't do without your support. Don't use this to defend yourself. Anyway, you're a loner. Lu Xiaoshan said. You are not ashamed to say that I am poisonous? Let's find out who is the first in the number of goals instigated. Zheng Qi said. Lu Xiaoshan snorted and then stopped talking. In these 2 games, Zheng Qi almost scored all the goals of the Overlord team. He scored 21 goals in 2 games, and only 1 goal was scored by Overlord. However, in the first 4 games, the Overlord team scored nearly 40 goals in 4 games, but almost all of them were instigated by Zheng Qi. In this regard, Lu Xiaoshan really has nothing to say. In 2 days, we will play against Santos. Do we have any special way to deal with it? Fan Zheng changed the subject. Nothing special, it's nothing more than using all the things we prepared before. Zheng Qi laughed. What did we prepare? Overlord was confused. Not only Overlord was confused, but everyone else was confused. Did we prepare anything? Nothing. In the previous game, we prepared a continuous passing pressure attack. In these 2 games, we prepared for you to run and I to break through to complete the goal. As long as we use these 2 types of attacks in a flexible way, what is there to be afraid of? Fast pace, drag them down back and forth, use our best offense, and fight them in a grand final. Zheng Qi said with a smile. The players of the Overlord team suddenly realized. These are what they showed in the previous games, and they are also the offensive means that can create huge threats. In the final, whether it is the overall passing and coordination to grab points or individual choice to break through, they can play more flexibly in offense. Although it seems that the success rate of the attack is not high, as long as the rhythm can be brought up, there will be no problem. Santos is a crazy offensive team. They will not play as rigorously as Bayern. Such an attack is a test of the overall offensive strength of both sides. Santos will not have any objection to such a challenge. And such an attack is also a good choice for the Overlord team. Comparing which side performs better in offensive and competing for the final championship is the most suitable for these two crazy offensive teams. Offensive is always the most exciting part of a football game. Whether it is the confrontation between the whole team or the instantaneous burst of inspiration of a player, it can bring wonderful goals to both sides and bring infinite pleasure to the audience. Santos is our final opponent. What a pleasant thing it is, don't you think? Zheng Qi laughed. A little bit. If it was the Chicago Bulls, it would be a bit boring. Lucian nodded thoughtfully. That's right. It's boring to play against a balanced and stable team. It's better to play against an offensive team like this. We can attack back and forth vigorously to see who can score more goals. B.A. Wang waved his fist and said loudly. Yes, that's the truth. Zheng Qi nodded. Their formation is used for attacking. You know, even their goalkeeper Caesar is a goalkeeper with a very large range of activities. He is used to running around and attacking. He regards the entire penalty area and even the area outside the penalty area as his own territory. This makes the distance between him and the back defender quite close, so they can't play defender. If they defend, their strength will be greatly discounted. Zheng Qi continued. But their offensive is really powerful. The two fullbacks have strong scoring ability. The central defender always dribbles forward to participate in the offensive. The front court needs to cooperate with the overall short pass, and individual breakthroughs in scoring have breakthroughs. There are quite a lot of offensive means. Lucian said. So we can't get entangled with them, just play our offensive ability. If we get entangled with their offensive, we will make the same mistakes that our opponent made. Zheng Qi waved his hand and said with a smile. The players of the Overlord team nodded repeatedly. Although they didn't feel anything during the game, after listening to Zheng Qi's analysis, they knew how the opponent lost. Seeing that those top teams would lose so unfairly, they certainly couldn't relax. Otherwise, with their level, if they relaxed, how could they have come this far? Now it's the last game of the finals, of course they won't relax. Okay, everyone has worked hard today, take a good rest tonight, take half a day off tomorrow, come back to train in the afternoon, and have recovery training the day after tomorrow. We will go to win the World Cup Championship the day after tomorrow. Zheng Qi waved his fist and said. The players of the Overlord team all laughed, but this time Overlord didn't dare to say that he would treat them to a meal. These two guys looked very rich and didn't care whether they were treated or not. If they still pretended to be rich, they would probably have to kneel on the washboard when they returned. Well, that's it, everyone is ready to leave. Zheng Qi waved his hand, indicating that his teammates could leave, and then he stood up first, left the court, and chose to log off. Xiaoji left too, the two of them left very quickly. Yingbu said. They're like this every time, and they don't want to reveal their identities, so it's normal to leave early. They must be professional players, but I don't know which two of them are professional players. Overlord laughed. I can't guess, these two people should not be from the same team, don't you see them always spraying each other? They must be the kind of opponents who don't have a good relationship. There are too many such opponents in professional games. They are opponents on the court, but they don't have much hatred off the court. This category is a bit too big. Fan Xing said after thinking for a while. Yeah, so we don't have to guess too much. There's only one game left. Let's enjoy it. Long Qi said with a smile. The others nodded repeatedly. Although they were destined to be separated from Zheng Qi and Lucian, they must play to their best in the last game and win the championship, so that they would not have any regrets. At this time, they didn't want to say anything like as long as we try our best, there will be no regrets. All they wanted was this championship, and use this championship to complete this farewell. Chapter 800. Ease the atmosphere. The finals are coming soon, are you nervous? Su Jing slowly stirred the cup of coffee in front of her and asked Zheng Qi softly. It's okay, there's nothing to be nervous about. Zheng Qi shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, no one knows who I am, whether I win or lose, it won't have much impact. You're not playing for fame. Su Jing smiled. Hectares, you really know me. Zheng Qi couldn't help but pat Su Jing's hand. Don't worry, I will try my best to win every game, but even if I can't win, it won't have much impact on me. That's right, you have always had this attitude towards the game, maybe that's why you performed so well. Zheng Qi didn't seem to notice Zheng Qi's actions, and answered very normally. Zheng Qi felt a little embarrassed. He tried to pull his hand back, but Zheng Qi grabbed it with his backhand. It's a bit unnatural to pull it back at this time. Zheng Qi said. Well, I should pretend to scratch my head. Zheng Qi replied. Then the two laughed at the same time. In the following time, they continued to chat as if nothing had happened. However, their hands never separated. You're in a very good mood today. The next day, when Lu Xiaoshan saw Zheng Qi, although he only saw the appearance of the system, Lu Xiaoshan still felt that Zheng Qi seemed to be in a very good mood at this moment, so high that it made people feel very happy. Well, it's nothing. I'm almost the same as usual. Zheng Qi replied with a smile. Whatever you say is what it is. Lu Xiaoshan was not a gossipy person. Is today's training still a quick attack? Well, the more you get used to it, the better the effect of the training will be. Zheng Qi waved his hand. Guys, we only have one day of training today. Tomorrow is the final. The players of the Overlord team responded in unison. Similarly, their emotions were also very high. Of course, with the finals approaching, if you are not in a good mood, then there must be something wrong. There is no outside betting now. Because of the amateur nature of classical football matches, there are certainly many people who bet on something, but basically the scale is small and will not affect the players of both teams. To a certain extent, the amateurism and non-professionalism of the game will certainly stagnate the development, but it will not bring some messy things. Of course, professionalism will definitely bring about rapid development that cannot be compared with the amateur era. Such things are always relative and complementary. The players of Santos are also training. As a country known as the Kingdom of Football in the world of classical football in the past, Brazil has not been particularly outstanding in the development of professional games in the football era after entering the new era. However, in the world of classical football, they still maintain their previous strength and dominance, and even get rid of the dilemma of being the strongest European team in the late classical professional football, and begin to regain the status of the Kingdom of Football. These positions are won back by these strong teams in Brazil one by one with outstanding performances in the world. Of course, Santos's contribution is also indispensable. This year, they have only one goal, that is to win the championship. If they win the championship, then next year they will also have only one goal, that is to defend the title. The courage to face the game with such an attitude is the key to their continuous victory. No matter what kind of opponent they face, they must use offense to win the game. They can lose, but they cannot lose offense. So the content of their training is all offense, without exception. Various offensive methods, continuous and uninterrupted passing by 4 or 5 people, small-scale passing and cooperation between 2 or 3 people, under the involvement of others, a player with the ball breaks through to complete the offense. Of course, there are many ways to attack, but in the final analysis, it is nothing more than the number of people directly involved in the offense. In terms of physical fitness, the Santos players are certainly not bad, but physical fitness is not their most outstanding aspect. In terms of confrontation, they can only be regarded as ordinary first-class level, which is enough for them not to suffer a big loss on the court. However, in the game, their physical flexibility allows them to always make many incredible offensive methods, which often make those orthodox defensive players suffer a big loss. Okay, today's training is over. Let's have a good rest. We must win tomorrow's final. Albert, the oldest player of Santos and the captain, clapped his hands and said, Don't worry. The defense of the Overlord team is not strong. Even if we play fast-paced offense and defense, we have a big advantage. With the rigid defense of their guards, they will definitely suffer a big loss in the face of our unpredictable offense. Zheng smiled and said, Yes, we still have top attackers who can grasp the opportunity well. Every time we attack, it is enough for one person to shine. But the Overlord team may not be able to shine every time. We don't need to seriously guard Thong and Lu Xiaoshan. We just need to defend in the zone and stand in our position. Play fast and increase the number of attacks instead of the success rate. Such tactics are beneficial to us. Bailey finally said. His words caused others to nod their heads. They were also good at playing fast. Although the Overlord team slowed down their pace in the 2 games, they were still used to playing faster. As long as Santos could actively improve the pace, the Overlord team would definitely follow them to play fast-paced offense, although Santos did not expect that the Overlord team also wanted to play fast offense. History is nothing new. The beginning of classical football was also like this. The top players in South America used their inspiration to defeat European players, but later on, their inspiration did not play a big role. Now it seems that in the football era, classical football has not developed much in the past 100 years. After all, such a talented offenser can still have a good effect. Zheng Qi said to Lu Xiaoxin with a smile. It's normal. In the past 100 years, there has been no serious professional competition for classical football. Of course, the development is slow. Everyone's energy is on the professional competition of the football era. Lu Xiaoxin replied. Yes, it's a pity. In fact, classical football can be played more interestingly. Zheng Qi said thoughtfully. We don't seem to be qualified to say that, Lu Xiaoxin said speechlessly. Zheng Qi laughed. Indeed, he had read some reports about classical football in the past 2 days. They all said that the overlord team's approach was making classical football boring because they had no solution. In fact, it is impossible to have no solution. They just didn't find a good solution. If it were a professional arena, we would have been glorious for 1 or 2 seasons, and then people would slowly find problems and find ways to defeat us. Then we would try to keep up. This was how classical football games used to be. Zheng Qi said. Is there a way to deal with our offenser? Lu Xiaoxin asked curiously. He was really curious about this question. Why should I study how to deal with myself? That's what our opponent should do. Zheng Qi waved his hand and said. Lu Xiaoxin was speechless again. If I have time, I will definitely study it, because only by knowing what tactics you will be defeated by can you prepare in advance. But don't we have the time now? Of course, we should strengthen our own abilities. As for how to deal with our tactics, that is something our opponent should worry about. Zheng Qi added. Lu Xiaoxin nodded. This was more reasonable. In the past, classical football developed mainly in the European leagues. The top leagues in Europe, plus the UEFA Cup and the Champions League, allowed the top teams in Europe to always have enough time to communicate. At the same time, with more games, more progress and sparks could naturally be generated. The easy access to information allowed classical football to develop faster in the early 21st century than in the past 100 years. This is the potential that players and coaches were forced to develop under the circumstances of professional collision and performance pressure. Now, the qualifiers in the World Cup of various countries are not enough to make everyone feel pressured. There is also a lack of communication and a large number of games, so progress is of course slow. Zheng Qi continued. I have also read a lot of information from those times. You're right. Lu Xiaoxin nodded. But this doesn't seem to have anything to do with us, right? Why are you talking about this suddenly? Isn't it just a casual chat? There will be a game tomorrow, so why don't you chat and ease the tense atmosphere? Zheng Qi laughed. You will be nervous too? This is really big news. Lu Xiaoxin looked at Zheng Qi and said in surprise. I'm also a human being. Zheng Qi sighed. I didn't see it, but I think there seems to be something wrong with your serious study of classical football. Lu Xiaoxin said thoughtfully. You think too much. I just do one thing, love one thing, and do it to the best of my ability. You should also understand such a noble character. Zheng Qi said. If you talk like this again, I will leave the team. Lu Xiaoxin was silent for a while, then said. Okay, why are you like Brother Fei, and can't take a joke? Zheng Qi said. Shinra Fei. That is indeed a little guy who is very similar to me, and his attitude towards the game is the same. It's a pity that he left Changfen, otherwise, even if I retired, he could at least keep Changfen at the top level for 5 years. Lu Xiaoxin sighed. Why did he leave Changfen, don't you really know? Zheng Qi suddenly asked. Lu Xiaoxin was slightly stunned, then shook his head slightly, and did not answer. Many things are not something we can control. I can only make sure that I don't do those things. Lu Xiaoxin answered softly after a long time. I don't think so. Zheng Qi shook his head firmly. Fin est captulo much as great as Peluga hasta el final. No esse indeed all like busgasms contenido exclusivo ixo immediato. Si escravata news teropatrian. Recurada, carda like, si escripsino donaking nos anima continued. Great as a todos nos vemos on elpsmodo.